Chapter 2838, Astonishing news when Fire Dance announced Zero Wing's plan to sell 1 million entry slots for Zero Wing City. A commotion broke out throughout the Eastern continent. Almost every power operating on the Eastern continent promptly held a meeting among their executives to discuss the entry slots. Orc Empire, Crimson Flame Fortress, how arrogant of Zero Wing. Aren't they afraid of suffering a backlash for pulling such a stunt? Snowscar, who was now a level 130, Tier 4 Berserker, sneered as he looked at the information displayed on the conference table. They probably aren't aware that Saint's Hand has already established a city in the Black Hills, together with over a dozen superpowers. The Black Hills. This was a level 130 neutral map connected to the Valley of Death, a forbidden land. Meanwhile, the Valley of Death was also the map that current players had the best chances of exploring successfully. Although the Forbidden Land was dangerous, according to the reports of the Tier 4 experts who had explored it already, the number of Tier 4 legacy lands appearing inside far exceeded that of other places. There were also plenty of ancient ruins hidden in the map, which were of significant help with getting promoted to Tier 4. In fact, even Tier 4 players could reap a lot of benefits from these ancient ruins. In response to Snowscar's words, Xinyuan, who was now a level 131, Tier 4 Great Wizard, turned to the woman exuding a heroic and charming aura, seated at the table's seat of honor. In a respectful tone he said, "Vice Guild Leader, Saint's Hand has sent us an invitation as well. They say they will offer us 10% of their new city's shares once it is constructed. However, we will need to garrison the city with 1 Tier 4 player and 20,000 Tier 3 players in return." How calculative of Saint's Hand. They must be aiming to have us help them deal with Zero Wing in the Orc Empire. A level 128 Tier 4 female assassin said, smirking. However, if they want to use us as pawns, don't you think that the price they're offering is too low? Snowscar also nodded in agreement with the female assassin. The Blackwater Guild was no longer the same as it was before. Under Xinyuan's lead, the guild had grown to a point where it could rival even super guilds. Moreover, unknown to the public, the guild even had 6 Tier 4 experts already. Xinyuan, tell Saint's Hand that they need to show more sincerity if they want to partner with us. We want at least 30% of the city's shares, Xinyuan said, opening her eyes. Also, notify Zero Wing of Saint's Hand's actions. Tell them that Blackwater is willing to partner with Zero Wing to go up against Saint's Hand's alliance. However, in return, they must allow all of Blackwater's elite members into Zero Wing City. Vice Guild Leader, you know how Zero Wing operates. There's no way they will agree to such a condition, Xinyuan argued, feeling a headache incoming. He had negotiated with Zero Wing for partnership many times in the past, yet he had faced rejection every time. Now that Zero Wing had the potential to rival the 5 great super guilds, it had even less need to heed Blackwater's demands. It doesn't matter if they don't accept it now, Xinyuan said nonchalantly. Once Saint's Hand opens their city and that side arrives, Zero Wing will have no choice but to agree to our demands. I understand. Xinyuan nodded. The current Zero Wing indeed had the qualifications to be arrogant. However, once Saint's Hand opened its city in the Black Hills, the situation would quickly reverse. After all, mainstream players were currently only at level 120. Although the Arctic Canyon was also an excellent location, it simply wasn't a place mainstream players could visit. At most, they could only make use of Zero Wing City's incredible mana environment. Not to mention, Saint's Hand's alliance consisted of more than a dozen superpowers. With the manpower and resources available to them, the alliance would soon become an existence that even the 5 great super guilds had to be wary of. At that time, Zero Wing's advantage in Tier 4 players would also disappear. However, Saint's Hand's alliance still wasn't the biggest problem Zero Wing would have to face but the world-shattering war looming over the main continent. A guild like Zero Wing, which had established a base in a level 140 neutral map, would definitely head the list of cannon fodder for this war. Currently, though, very few people in God's domain actually knew of this upcoming war. The only reason Blackwater knew about it was Xinyuan's special identity. Just when Blackwater was about to notify Zero Wing of Saint's Hand's actions, Saint's Hand actually announced its astonishing plan to the entire Eastern continent. Moreover, Saint's Hand even declared that it would open its city to everyone and charge a cheap entrance fee of only 1 magic crystal or 50 silver coins. As soon as this news came out, many of the first-rate powers considering partnering with Zero Wing promptly changed their minds. After all, although Zero Wing City possessed an excellent environment, the entrance fee it charged was simply beyond the various first-rate powers' means. Not to mention, the city's entry slots would be auctioned. In other words, the entry slots wouldn't cost just 10 magic crystals. By the end of the auction, each slot might actually go for 15 or even 20 magic crystals. Moreover, this was only the price to enter the city. Once inside the city, they were bound to incur all sorts of other expenditures as well. Rather than spending all those magic crystals, it would be much better to head to Saint's Hand City and explore the Valley of Death for ancient ruins and Tier 4 legacy lands. Not only could they save up on a lot of magic crystals by doing so, but their potential income was also higher. Sky Spring City, Zero Wing's residents, guild leader, 90% of the first-rate power seeking to partner with us and 80% of the adventurer team seeking to join us changed their minds after Saint's Hand's announcement, Fire Dance said, a hint of disbelief in her eyes as she read the report she just received. There won't be any competition for the entry slots. In fact, the 1 million slots we're offering exceed the remaining guild's demand. It doesn't matter. Let Saint's Hand do whatever it wants. Our plan will remain the same. We will still sell 1 million entry slots during the auction, Shifeng said, chuckling as he looked at the statistical report. When the time comes, just sell as many slots as possible. To begin with, we're not doing this to earn magic crystals. We're just trying to keep Zero Wing City operational. You might be right, but if we have enough magic crystals, we could construct another mobile fortress, right? Fire Dance said regretfully. The magic crystals Zero Wing earned from its members visiting Zero Wing City were already more than enough to keep the city functioning normally. The only problems remaining were the recruitment and maintenance of the city's NPC soldiers. However, resolving these issues wasn't a big deal for the present Zero Wing. This was because many guild members were willing to develop themselves in Zero Wing City. There were also more than 20,000 Tier 3 experts from Heaven's Blade and Azura. In total, Zero Wing City already had an astonishing 50,000 Tier 3 players operating in it. At this point, all they needed to do was wait until the guild accumulated enough Tier 3 members to ensure Zero Wing City's security. Once the city's security was no longer a concern, they could open up the city to NPCs and begin recruiting NPC soldiers in large numbers. However, the mobile fortress's power had made a deep impression on Fire Dance. She believed it would be wonderful if Zero Wing could gain another mobile fortress. Let's not talk about getting another mobile fortress, Shifeng said, chuckling. What we can do is further increase the number of Tier 4 players. We have to improve the guild's strength. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You further increase? Fire Dance parroted, confused by Shifeng's words. Is that even doable? Producing Tier 4 players was easier said than done. Finding Tier 4 legacy lands was one thing. Mastering a Tier 4 skill or spell within the allotted time was another thing altogether. The help Zero Wing City's environment provided for this aspect could already be regarded as the best available in God's domain. She found it hard to imagine other ways to help Zero Wing produce even more Tier 4 players. Of course, smiling, Shifeng said, contact Summer and the others and have them gather in Zero Wing City's City Lord's mansion. If it were before he had visited the ancient god's domain, he would indeed have no way of accomplishing such a feat. However, after his trip to the ancient era, he did. And that was by using the ancient beast sculpture. Chapter 2839 Statues Astonishing Function Zero Wing City, City Lord's Mansion. Alluring Summer, Shadow Sword, Turtle Dove, Cola, Yulan, Blackie, Flying Shadow, Silent Blade, Stubborn Bone, Yi Wumian, Rampant Blade, Su Qianlu, Minor Wind and Graceful Moon gathered in the second underground floor of the City Lord's mansion after receiving Fire Dance's summons. Looking at Fire Dance, who was guiding their group, Cola asked curiously, Commander, why did the guild leader suddenly have us come over? At Cola's question, the others in the group also looked at Fire Dance curiously. For the sake of raising their chances of getting promoted to Tier 4, they had all focused on training in the battle arena recently to improve their control over mana. In Zero Wing City's mana environment, their control over mana had improved at a noticeable rate. Among them, Alluring Summer had become a master magician and even gained her own mana domain. Her achievements had spurred the rest of them to train even more zealously. Yet, instead of letting them focus on their training, Fire Dance had suddenly summoned them here. It's a secret, Fire Dance answered with a smile. Moreover, this trip will be beneficial for you. You might even increase your chances of getting promoted to Tier 4 by a large margin. Fire Dance naturally knew of everyone's desire to get promoted to Tier 4. After all, Zero Wing City's environment was greatly beneficial to even a Tier 4 player like herself, let alone Tier 3 players. Moreover, in the current God's domain, Tier 3 players couldn't make any waves at all. Only by reaching Tier 4 would a player have an impact on the big picture. Are you trying to trick us, Commander? We already have Zero Wing City's environment to help us. Is there really another way to increase our chances of promotion further? Shadow Sword asked skeptically. However, he couldn't help growing a little eager and excited at Fire Dance's answer. He understood very clearly that with his current standards, it would be incredibly difficult for him to get promoted to Tier 4, even with the support of Zero Wing City's excellent environment. It would most likely take him several attempts before he could get promoted. And worse, players who failed their Tier 4 promotion quest had to wait for a long period before they could re-challenge their promotion quest. Even if he could find another Tier 4 legacy land quickly, he would still have to wait up to a month. If he suffered consecutive failures, it could very well take him up to half a year or possibly more to reach Tier 4. If he were to hover at Tier 3 for half a year, he simply couldn't imagine how far he would fall behind the current Tier 4 players. After all, there were still many places in God's domain that only Tier 4 players and above could set foot in. Meanwhile, the opportunities, legacies, and items available in these forbidden lands were far superior to what other maps provided. That was what the guild leader said, Fire Dance said, nodding. Otherwise, he wouldn't have interrupted your training spree and called you here. After saying so, Fire Dance stopped before a stone door sealed by a magic array. Standing guard beside this stone door were 4 level 140, Tier 3 fine gold guards. Even if a Tier 4 player came here, they shouldn't think of getting past these NPCs quickly. When the 4 NPCs saw Fire Dance, they promptly removed the seal on the stone door. Subsequently, the stone door parted slowly, revealing a room the size of a basketball court. Many magic arrays isolated the room. Even if a Tier 4 player made a ruckus inside the room, their actions would go unnoticed in the outside world. Shifeng was waiting inside the isolated room. After glancing at everyone, Shifeng said, "Come on in." In response to Shifeng's words, Fire Dance entered the room curiously, followed by the rest of the group shortly afterward. After everyone entered the room, the 4 guards outside the room closed the door and quietly stood watch by the door, none of them daring to relax for even a moment. Having entered the room, Fire Dance and the others couldn't help looking at Shifeng in confusion. This was because even after entering the isolated room, they failed to sense anything special about it. In fact, the mana density inside the room even seemed slightly lower compared to outside. Upon seeing everyone's confusion, Shifeng smiled and said, "You must be wondering why I summoned you to such a place, right? Guild leader, the commander said you have a way to further increase our chances of getting promoted to Tier 4. Unable to hold back his curiosity any longer, Kola asked, "Is that true?" Truthfully, Kola didn't have much confidence in getting promoted to Tier 4, since his combat standard was still stuck at the flowing water realm even now. His control over mana was also only at the advanced magician standard. It was basically impossible for him to learn a Tier 4 legacy skill within a short period. It's true. However, how much improvement you gain will depend on yourselves, Shifeng said, nodding. He then pointed at the ancient beast statue set up in the center of the room and continued, "This thing is the key to your promotion to Tier 4. A statue? Everyone present grew even more confused when they heard Shifeng's words. Even Fire Dance was no exception. Although the statue in front of them looked exquisite, no matter how they looked at it, it did not seem like a tool that could help them reach Tier 4. "Observe it from a closer distance," Shifeng said, chuckling. "But don't use your eyes. Use your whole body to perceive it." The ancient beast statue was an incomparably mysterious object, and it was incredibly difficult for someone to notice its uniqueness. This was because the ancient beast statue would reveal its properties only in an environment with incredibly dense mana. Moreover, these properties were noticeable only at close distance. If one stood too far away from the statue, one wouldn't sense anything special about it. In fact, placing the statue in a room would even cause the density of the mana in the room to drop. In the past, some players had even treated the ancient beast statues as junk and sold them cheap. At Shifeng's advice, Kola and the others approached the statue. And when everyone got within 10 yards of the ancient beast statue, their expressions promptly changed. How is this possible? The operating principles of mana have become much clearer. There's at least a 50% improvement. As a Tier 4 player, Fire Dance was the quickest to notice the changes the ancient beast statue brought about, and she couldn't help gaping at the statue in disbelief. Assuming that she could view the operating principles of mana at only 10% clarity under normal circumstances, then in Zero Wing City's environment, she could view the operating principles at 20% clarity. However, standing beside the ancient beast statue, she could view the operating principles at 30% clarity. Kola and the others did not achieve as good a result as Fire Dance since they were still at Tier 3. However, they still managed to achieve a clarity of at least 20%. At this time, their perception of the operating principles of mana was superior to the average Tier 4 players. Now, they were basically viewing the world around them from a higher perspective than even Tier 4 players. As Tier 3 players, the benefits they could gain from such an experience were immeasurable. If this situation leaked to the public, the various powers of God's domain would most likely go crazy. Fire Dance finally understood why Shifeng had instructed her to be extremely careful when coming to this place and even limiting the people she could invite to only the guild's core executives. The next moment, the isolated room felt indescribably quiet. This was because Kola, Alluring Summer, and everyone else had wholeheartedly thrown themselves into their enhanced perception with no intention of exiting this immersion. Shifeng did not find this situation surprising either. After obtaining world authority, his perception of the operating principles of mana had reached an incredibly high level. Within the ancient beast statue's vicinity, he could even achieve a 40% clarity. Back when he was controlling Ferbero, a half-step demon king, he had only managed to achieve a 50% clarity, yet he already had a feeling of invincibility. Of course, this was only a misconception arising from suddenly obtaining so much power. Even so, the brief experience of viewing the world through Ferbero's senses had provided him with immense help in developing his mana body and improving his control over mana. Although he didn't get the same feeling when standing next to the ancient beast statue, he was relatively close to that feeling already. And while subject to this sensation, even he couldn't help wishing he could disregard all his duties and focus solely on researching the operating principles of mana. So what more Kola and the others? Shortly after Fire Dance immersed herself in her enhanced perception, the mana around her body began rampaging. It was evident that she was trying to break through her mana body's 100% threshold. Shifeng was slightly surprised to see this. He then took out a colorful crystal from his bag and handed it to Fire Dance, saying, "Don't rush to break through yet. Do it after you finish learning the legacy inside this thing." In response to Shifeng's words, Fire Dance halted her attempt to break through and accepted the memory crystal. However, after checking the memory crystal, she was stunned. She never thought that Shifeng would actually possess such a precious legacy. Moreover, the legacy recorded in the memory crystal even contained information on how to reconstruct one's mana body. For Tier 4 players like herself, this information was priceless. Guild leader, this is a Sword Saint's legacy. Giving it to me would be wasteful, Fire Dance said hesitantly. She was no fool. Anyone who had gotten promoted to Tier 4 would know what was most important to a Tier 4 player: achieving a breakthrough in one's mana body and reconstructing it. This was the basis of getting promoted to Tier 5. However, Shifeng simply chuckled and said, "Relax. This is a complete legacy crystal. Can be used up to 9 times. Every person will get the best result from the crystal only on their first use. Using it more than once would be a waste. Now that you are one of Zero Wing's key combatants, it will be of great help to the guild if you can further improve yourself." Teresa had given him a complete Tier 5 legacy crystal that could be used 9 times. And although it was a Sword Saint's legacy, as the swordsman and assassin classes were both physical classes, an assassin could still gain significant help from the legacy. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. If Fire Dance could elevate her mana body's potential to 105% due to this legacy crystal, it would be of significant help to the present Zero Wing. Since Shifeng wasn't accepting any argument, Fire Dance eventually gritted her teeth and activated the memory crystal. After all, what Shifeng said was true. There were significant differences even between Tier 4 players. Take Violet Cloud for example. Because she had long since broken through her mana body's 100% threshold, her combat power had surpassed Fire Dance's by a large margin as soon as she reached Tier 4. If Fire Dance could break through the 100% threshold now, she would be able to hold her ground even against monstrously strong Tier 4 experts. Immediately, the colorful crystal in Fire Dance's hand released several streaks of light that flowed straight into her eyes. Simultaneously, a large amount of information was transmitted directly into her brain. Chapter 2840. Consecutive breakthroughs. As information from the Sword Saint's legacy flooded Fire Dance's mind, the mana she exuded strengthened and weakened in intervals. It was evident that she had received a lot of inspiration from the legacy. Both her control over mana and understanding of mana rose at a visible rate. Seeing this development, Shifeng couldn't help growing envious. Truthfully, he had constantly been thinking of using the Sword Saint's legacy himself ever since he received it. However, he also understood that he wouldn't benefit much from it. This was because the current bottleneck he faced wasn't related to mana but his concentration. To raise the strength of his mana body to a whole new level, he needed to raise his concentration to a point where he could control his mana body with a threefold manipulation method. Hence, using the Sword Saint's legacy now would simply be a waste. I should start training and adapting to a threefold manipulation method as well. Shifeng smiled involuntarily when he saw everyone in the room improving rapidly. Then he sat down and began his own training. Back when he was in the Ancient Gods domain, his concentration standard had only been at the Tier 4 intermediate standard. Among Tier 4 existences, that wasn't anything to brag about. However, merging with the Tier 4 Hellfire had thoroughly tempered his concentration. He now estimated that his concentration was at the Tier 4 peak standard already. He should be only one step away from reaching the Tier 5 standard and achieving world creation. Of course, just elevating his concentration standard to Tier 5 wouldn't be enough to achieve world creation. He would still need to become a Grandmaster Magician first. This was also the main reason many players and NPCs couldn't achieve world creation even after reaching Tier 5. After all, becoming a Grandmaster Magician was incredibly challenging. Generally, most people capable of becoming a Grandmaster Magician were lifestyle Grandmasters. Yet, most of these lifestyle Grandmasters were unsuited for combat and were incapable of reaching Tier 5, only reaching Tier 4 at best. This situation was especially obvious among players. In the past, over 70% of experts that had achieved world creation were lifestyle Grandmasters stuck at Tier 4, and many experts who had risen to Tier 5 couldn't help envying those players. After all, the disparity in combat power between individuals with and without world creation was like the difference between heaven and earth. Even at Tier 5, world creation could still influence a battle. Following which, time passed swiftly. In the blink of an eye, half a day had gone by already. Amid Shifeng's repeated attempts at executing a threefold manipulation method, the mana Fire Dance exuded suddenly skyrocketed in intensity. Her rapid transformation even kicked up a mana storm, the phenomenon startling everyone in the room. What's going on with this fire? The mana she's exuding is so powerful. Flying Shadow exclaimed. He was thunderstruck when he saw the white mist wreathing Fire Dance's body. She should have broken through her mana body's limits, Turtledove said enviously. No, this shouldn't be just a simple breakthrough, Alluring Summer said, shaking her head. I've broken through the 100% threshold as well. Yet compared to Fire Dance right now, the phenomenon my breakthrough created was much weaker. Even if she achieved her breakthrough at Tier 4, the reaction shouldn't be so exaggerated. Alluring Summer had much greater authority when talking about breaking through the mana body's limits, since she had unlocked her mana body to 102% potential already. Back when Alluring Summer broke through, her mana body had indeed undergone a qualitative transformation and provoked a powerful reaction in her surroundings. However, that reaction was much more subdued than Fire Dance's. At this time, the mana surrounding Fire Dance was already almost liquid. Even if Alluring Summer factored in the special environment of this room and the fact that Fire Dance was at Tier 4, a breakthrough in the mana body's limits still shouldn't generate such a powerful reaction. Several more minutes later, Fire Dance finally stabilized her mana, and an excited expression immediately appeared on her face. "Guild leader, I succeeded," Fire Dance said as she looked at Shifeng excitedly. "My mana body is currently at a 107% completion rate. If you give me a little more time, I can even reach 110%. She had heard plenty regarding the mana body from Shifeng. According to him, after breaking through the 100% threshold, the mana body would see further qualitative transformations at the 105% and 110% thresholds. Although she had yet to reach a 110% completion rate, with the information the Sword Saint's legacy provided and the Ancient Beast statue's effect, she was now confident of reaching that threshold. At that time, her combat power would definitely surpass Violet Cloud's. After all, Violet Cloud's mana body was only at a 108% completion rate right now. "You reached 107% on the first breakthrough?" Shifeng was shocked. Normally, a player couldn't reach or exceed 105% on their first breakthrough. Even Violet Cloud was no exception. After all, players would need to overhaul the method they used to manipulate their mana body to reach this threshold. Nevertheless, Fire Dance had skated through this process. The improvement she achieved was beyond remarkable. That Sword Saint had a very thorough understanding of the mana body. His explanations were also simple to understand. "It's a pity that I'm not a swordsman myself. Otherwise, I would have improved even more," Fire Dance said regretfully. "If this legacy is given to Shadow Sword and the others, they should have a very easy time breaking through the 110% threshold. If you used it, you would probably achieve even more astonishing results, Guild Leader. The legacy actually has such great effects?" Shifeng couldn't help feeling tempted by Fire Dance's words. However, he still suppressed his agitated heart in the end and said calmly, "I'll pass for now. However, we can let Shadow Sword and the other swordsmen use the legacy once they reach Tier 4. Anyone with a physical class can also use it if they manage to break through the 100% threshold." Shifeng was indeed very tempted to use the Sword Saint's legacy and go beyond his mana body's present 110% completion rate. He might even be lucky enough to reach a 115% completion rate. If that happened, he would have full confidence in completing the Divine Dragon's trial. However, his current priorities were developing his concentration standard and improving his understanding of magic arrays. So long as he succeeded in doing so, combined with the Sword Saint's legacy, he could develop his mana body beyond even a 115% completion rate. In fact, once he reached level 150, he could even start trying to create a personalized mana body. After all, not every Tier 5 expert in the past had started creating personalized mana bodies only after exceeding the 110% completion rate. Many of these Tier 5 experts had tried and succeeded even at 109% and 110%. This was because there was no integral connection between a mana body's completion rate and the creation of a personalized mana body. Having a higher completion rate only meant that a player was more familiar with the mana body they currently had. At most, this familiarity would grant the player an easier time in creating a personalized mana body. It wasn't essential. As for the matter of sharing the Sword Saint's legacy, if it were possible, he would prefer to let only Tier 4 swordsmen use it. However, given the circumstances, Zero Wing didn't have 7 more Tier 4 swordsmen suitable. Hence, he had no choice but to loosen the condition. That way, the guild could produce more above-average Tier 4 players. "I understand." Fire Dance nodded. Over the next 10 days, Zero Wing's core executives achieved significant breakthroughs one after another, thanks to the Ancient Beast statue. In addition, as the guild had discovered quite a number of Tier 4 legacy lands in the Arctic Canyon, everyone began challenging their Tier 4 promotion quests. As for Fire Dance, after reaching a 110% completion rate with her mana body, she led an exploration team into the Arctic Canyon, drastically increasing Zero Wing's income, particularly of top-tier level 130+ equipment and materials. The amount of equipment and materials Zero Wing was currently raking in surpassed even that of ordinary superpowers. Among the harvests Zero Wing made, the most notable one was 7 Luminaries crystals. Because the Arctic Canyon's team dungeons dropped small quantities of 7 Luminaries crystals, Zero Wing earned over 600 units of 7 Luminaries crystal in just 10 short days. Even Shifeng was astonished by this harvest. He never thought that the Arctic Canyon would be so rich in resources. Fire Dance's team was responsible for more than half of the 7 Luminaries crystals earned. At this time he could already foresee that once Zero Wing gained more and more Tier 4 players, the guild's income of 7 Luminaries crystals would reach staggering levels. Meanwhile, Shifeng had been relatively free compared to Fire Dance and the others these past 10 days. He was also only half a step away from successfully implementing the threefold manipulation method on his mana body. However, during this time, huge events had also taken place in God's domain one after another. Firstly, there was the appearance of Saint Heart City. Secondly, the various superpowers had received news that Lu Xinglua had his qualifications as the Starling Corporation's heir stripped due to his numerous failures, and that his game account had gotten crippled. This unexpected development placed heavy pressure on the heirs of the major corporations, leading the various superpowers. Thirdly, the first batch of players belonging to Zero Wing's allies had entered Zero Wing City. When these 20,000 players entered the city, Zero Wing's allies instantly understood Zero Wing City's value. For a time, Zero Wing City's entry slots enjoyed even greater popularity. However, the best piece of news for Zero Wing was Gentle Snow, Aqua Rose, Zhao Yueru, Yan Tianxing, and Iluafei's successful promotion to Tier 4. Their success had instantly boosted Zero Wing's overall combat power by a large margin, and exploring the Arctic Canyon became a lot easier. Zero Wing City, Candlelight Trading Firm, Special Forging Room. Sure enough, breaching the Grandmaster Magician threshold isn't an easy task. A pale-faced Shifeng smiled bitterly as he looked at the Tier 3 mana set equipment he had just produced. After several days of research, he concluded that only 2 methods would let him achieve threefold manipulation, developing his concentration to the Tier 5 standard and becoming a Grandmaster Magician. For the time being, developing his concentration to the Tier 5 standard was nigh impossible since it required fortuitous encounters and undergoing tempering. This left him with raising his magician rank. Producing Tier 3 mana set equipment was one of the ways that could help him do so because the most difficult aspect of producing the set was engraving its magic array. Although the system deemed the set's magic array as only a master magic array, it rivaled even Grandmaster magic arrays in complexity. If he could successfully engrave the entire magic array in one go, he wouldn't be far off from becoming a Grandmaster Magician. Unfortunately, even after working for several days consecutively and producing more than 200 sets of Tier 3 mana set equipment, he still couldn't engrave the set's magic array in one go. He felt as if an invisible barrier was preventing him from advancing. Meanwhile, Shifeng also happened to reach level 150, the threshold where he could get promoted to Tier 5. Guild Leader, you previously asked the Boulder Corporation to look into Phoenix Rain's little sister, right? At this time, Liang Jing suddenly contacted Shifeng. They just sent back news that Phoenix Rain's little sister should be staying in Haitian City's upper zone. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You alright, got it. Nodding, Shifeng promptly chose to log out of God's domain, and decided to pay Haitian City's upper zone. Apart from checking up on Phoenix Rain's little sister, he could also use this opportunity to broaden his business circle to Haitian City's upper zone. Every upper zone had its own contribution competition. Since the various corporations were placing such heavy importance on this season's competition, it would be a huge waste not to take advantage of it and make a killing. After all, Zero Wing was already a massive organization that had many mouths to feed. A large number of newcomers with great potential had even joined the guild's headquarters recently. There were also the resources needed to nurture Zero Wing's executives. With all the guild's resource requirements, simply relying on the 5 States Corporation would be far from enough. Chapter 2841 Mental Strength Training House, Haitian City, Upper Zone. A luxury hovercar slowly landed in front of the Upper Zone's entrance. A man and a woman then got out of the car, their appearance instantly attracting the hundreds of teenage boys and girls waiting by the entrance. This man and woman were none other than Shifeng and Mushin. However, all of the teenagers focused on Mushin, their eyes filled with surprise and confusion. Why is the Boulder Corporation's heir here at Haitian City's upper zone? Could she be transferring to our upper zone? That's impossible. I heard that Mushin broke through recently and acquired Grade 1 authority in Yuantian City's upper zone. Moreover, not only does she have the Boulder Corporation's full support, but the base layer supervisor is also quite supportive of her. At this rate, She might enter the middle layer of Yuantian City's upper zone. Why would she want to come to our upper zone? The teenage boys and girls began a heated discussion among themselves when they saw Mushin. They couldn't understand why a big shot like her would suddenly come to Haitian City's upper zone. Mushin, on the other hand, paid no attention to the teenagers discussing her. She behaved as if these people did not exist at all. Why are there so many people taking Haitian City's test? It's more than 10 times the number I saw at Yuantian City, Shifeng asked, astonished when he saw the crowd thronging the entrance. When he took the test to enter Yuantian City's upper zone, there had only been several dozen other people taking the test with him. Such a huge difference between upper zones was incredible. Haitian City's upper zone is more populous than Yuantian City's upper zone. It was also constructed a little earlier. Looking at the teenagers waiting by the entrance, Mushin shook her head and explained, however, these people aren't talents the Green God Company is nurturing internally. They were born inside Haitian City's upper zone. Also, this place is holding its annual evaluation, which is why so many people are here. The corporations behind these people will use the test results to determine their future successors and daily resource allocations. For these people, this period will most likely be the most competitive period of their lives. At this point, a hint of frustration darkened Mushin's eyes. It was precisely because of this competition that her relationship with Kurue wasn't particularly good. Compared to life in the outside world, life in an upper zone was much harsher. I see. So that's why these children have such astonishing physical fitness, Shifeng commented. When he looked at the teenagers before him, he couldn't help sighing ruefully. He had to admit that the upper zone's children were indeed amazing. From what he could see, every one of these teenagers could easily beat up martial artists below the master standard. This wasn't a standard the youths born and living in the outside world could match. Having such amazing physical fitness at such a young age, these teenagers would become even more amazing once they entered God's domain. Let alone reaching Tier 4, they could very well reach Tier 5. At this moment, Shifeng finally understood why the various superpowers had so many Tier 4 and Tier 5 experts. He could produce many Tier 4 experts just from the group of youngsters in front of him. Let's hurry inside. Taking a look at the time, Mushin said, if we wait until the mental path activates like last time, it'll be even more difficult to find that girl you mentioned. After all, we are residents of Yuantian City's upper zone, not of Haitian City's upper zone. Shifeng nodded in response and followed Mushin straight into Haitian City's upper zone. Although a person could freely visit all upper zones once they had a registered ID, the upper zones operated like independent organizations and competed with each other. In fact, some of the tasks the Green God Company assigned to the various upper zones were dependent on the performance of each upper zone. Hence, the residents of every upper zone were somewhat hostile toward the residents of other upper zones. Under normal circumstances, an upper zone's resident wouldn't visit another upper zone. After all, one mistake could easily result in a fight. Upon seeing Mushin and Shifeng walking straight into the upper zone, the teenagers standing by the entrance couldn't help envying them. This was because people older than 20 who could enter the upper zone directly had already obtained IDs in the upper zone. These people wouldn't have to struggle to enter the upper zone, unlike themselves. Who's that man? Why is a person like Mushin escorting him? He might be the son of some big shot living on the middle layer. Otherwise, why would someone of Mushin's standing guide him? Damn it! This is too enviable. If I were the son or nephew of a mental strength master, I wouldn't have to struggle here so desperately. I could even enter one of the middle layer's mansions for training. At this time, the teenagers waiting by the entrance couldn't help gazing at Shifeng with jealous eyes. As children of major corporations, they might be objects of envy for the people living in the outside world, but they were nothing in the upper zone. Only the big shots living in the upper zone's middle layer would garner respect from the upper zone's residents. After entering Haitian City's upper zone, Shifeng found that this place was indeed more populous than Yuantian City's upper zone. In fact, one could even consider it more prosperous. Not only were there high-rises all over the upper zone, but there was also something called the Mental Strength Training House here. Such a facility did not exist in Yuantian City's upper zone. The Mental Strength Training House wasn't particularly large. The entire building was only 2 stories tall, with the footprint of a basketball court. Yet, a crowd waited to enter this small building. including children of major corporations and the Green God Company's talents. There were even direct successors of major corporations standing in line. This was a sight that definitely couldn't be found in Yuantian City's upper zone. In fact, even Muxin felt an urge to enter the mental strength training house when she saw it. However, she could only let this urge fade away. This was because the notice outside the training house very clearly stated that only those with grade 2 authority or above in Haitian City's upper zone could use the training house. People of other upper zones would not be allowed entry at all. Aren't upper zones open to all residents with ID? Shi Feng was confused when he saw the notice. Why is there such a rule in Haitian City's upper zone? Isn't this unfair to people of other upper zones? The upper zone placed extreme importance on mental strength. One could easily imagine how attractive a place capable of helping a person improve their mental strength would be for the residents of the various upper zones. There's no helping this. The Mental Strength Training House is a resource Haitian City's upper zone won after competing with the other upper zones. Hence, the Green God Company gave the residents of Haitian City's upper zone exclusive use of it. It is also why many more corporations are willing to invest in Haitian City compared to the other upper zones, Muxin said, shaking her head. A bitter smile appearing on her face, she added, if not for the Boulder Corporation having deep roots in Yuantian City, we would have most likely moved the focus of our development to Haitian City already. Muxin's words didn't particularly surprise Shi Feng. Although he had not experienced the training house's effects, mental strength was everything in the upper zone. It would naturally be very attractive to the various corporations. In fact, Shi Feng also felt tempted to transfer to Haitian City's upper zone. After all, his concentration was currently bottlenecked at the Tier 4 peak standard. Thus far, he had already used 3 phantom potions, yet he was still nowhere near the Tier 5 concentration standard. While Shi Feng and Muxin were conversing, an argument suddenly broke out in front of the training house. Lu Tiandi, I've already said my adventurer team will never join you. A fair-skinned girl sporting a double ponytail and wearing light blue sportswear glared at a handsome and dapper young man in his early 20s, her eyes blazing with indescribable rage. However, the young man in question paid no heed to the girl's anger at all. Instead, a robust, middle-aged man standing beside him smiled and said, Miss Ji Lurong, you are free to refuse my young master's invitation, but if you do, you can forget about obtaining resources from anyone in this upper zone from now on. You should understand very clearly that my young master has the power to blacklist you. None of the people present dared to refute the middle-aged man's words. In fact, nobody stepped forward to champion the girl. This was because Lu Tiandi was the Starline Corporation's new heir. With the Starline Corporation's influence in Haitian City's upper zone, it would be child's play for it to prevent the upper zone's residents from selling resources to a specific individual. Looking at the girl named Ji Lurong, the middle-aged man chuckled and said, Miss Ji, I advise you to listen obediently to my young master's words and have your entire adventurer team join us. Otherwise, you shouldn't think of staying in Haitian City's upper zone anymore because nobody here will sell you any resources. You shouldn't even think of asking your older sister for help either. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. At the middle-aged man's words, many of the corporate children present looked at Ji Lurong sympathetically. In Haitian City's upper zone, even major corporations wouldn't dare to offend the Starline Corporation outright, let alone an individual with no background. If Ji Lurong refused Lu Tiandi's demand, everyone could already foresee the girl having to leave the upper zone shortly after due to a lack of resources. However, as Ji Lurong remained silent, the middle-aged man smiled triumphantly, and the spectating crowd sighed ruefully. A low voice suddenly resounded in the area. Is that so? What if I want to sell resources to this young lady? Chapter 2842 Silent Upper Zone. A deathly silence suddenly fell over the area as everyone turned toward the voice's origin. What entered everyone's sight was an ordinary-looking young man clad in dark gray casual wear. Besides his ordinary appearance, the young man also felt no different from an ordinary passerby. This person was none other than Shi Feng. Although he had grown a lot taller as his physical fitness improved, he still couldn't change his plain appearance. Who is that guy? Isn't he a little too courageous? That guy is dead for sure. Even the successors of the other major corporations here wouldn't dare blatantly refute Lu Tiandi's words. Could this guy be a newcomer to the upper zone? The gathered people were astonished as they looked at Shi Feng. They never imagined that such an ignorant person could exist in Haitian City's upper zone. If it were the Starline Corporation of the past, there would still be many people who would dare go against it. They definitely wouldn't let Lu Tiandi, who was merely the corporation's heir, act so arrogantly. Even Lu Xinglua, the corporation's previous heir, hadn't dared behave like Lu Tiandi was behaving now. However, Lu Tiandi's background was different from Lu Xinglua's. Lu Tiandi had caught the eye of one of the middle layer's big shots at a young age, and had been secretly nurtured by this big shot since then. Only after Lu Tiandi had replaced Lu Xinglua as the Starline Corporation's new successor, had this matter gotten exposed. Due to this revelation, the Starline Corporation's status in Haitian City's upper zone had instantly skyrocketed. Now, even the other major corporations operating in the base layer had no choice but to tuck their tails in front of the Starline Corporation. Otherwise, Ikue, Lu Tiandi's butler, wouldn't have dared to be so arrogant, openly making such a bold statement in public. Ji Luorong, who had been standing silently in front of the training house all this time, couldn't help turning to Shi Feng in surprise and confusion. She never thought that someone would be willing to stand up for her. At the same time though, she couldn't help worrying for Shi Feng. This was because she was well aware of Lu Tiandi's extraordinary identity. He was destined to live in the middle layer, and even the Green God Company would have to show him a certain degree of respect. Kid, it seems you're quite courageous, huh? Do you not know who my young master is? Ikue asked as he looked at Shi Feng coldly. Or do you intend to make an enemy of the Starline Corporation? Ikue had just stated that so long as Lu Tiandi gave the word, nobody in Haitian City's upper zone would dare trade resources with Ji Luorong. Yet, no sooner had he made this declaration than Shi Feng announced his intention to trade with Ji Luorong. Shi Feng had basically slapped the Starline Corporation's face. Upon hearing Ikue's words, many people present frowned at Shi Feng worriedly. Everyone could tell that Ikue was up to no good. The middle-aged man was escalating a trivial matter into a problem that concerned the reputation of the entire Starline Corporation. If Shi Feng dared to say anything more now, the consequences were unimaginable. He might even face a similar end as Ji Luorong's and get kicked out of the upper zone eventually. After all, it was incredibly difficult to live in the upper zone without resources. When Ji Luorong heard Ikue's words, she gritted her teeth and resolved to stop Shi Feng from championing her. However, just as she was about to take action, a lithe figure suddenly appeared before her. "Little girl, you don't need to worry about him," Mushin said. Looking at Ji Luorong's worried expression, Mushin smiled and continued, "Even the Starline Corporation wouldn't dare do anything against him. Shi Feng not only possessed Grade 1 authority in the upper zone, but was also a neutralizing grandmaster. Let alone the measly heir of the Starline Corporation. Even if the Starline Corporation's current owner were here, he wouldn't be able to do anything against Shi Feng." Looking at Mushin's dazzling beauty, Ji Luorong could tell that Mushin had an extraordinary background, which should mean that Shi Feng did as well. However, she still couldn't help worrying. But before Ji Luorong could say anything more, however, a low voice resounded throughout the area once more. "So what if I am?" These 5 simple words instantly created a commotion among the spectating crowd. Is he crazy? He's actually openly making an enemy of the Starline Corporation? Does he not know what death is? If it were the Starline Corporation of the past, even the upper zone's ordinary corporate children wouldn't fear offending it. After all, they were all residents of the upper zone's base layer. Why should they be afraid of each other? However, the situation was different now that the Starline Corporation had the backing of a middle layer big shot. That big shot could just make some random excuse and have them removed from the upper zone temporarily. Once they were outside the safe haven known as the upper zone, the Starline Corporation would have plenty of means to deal with them. Upon hearing Shi Feng's response, Ikue was momentarily dumbfounded as well. After snapping out of his daze, he bellowed, "Punk! It seems you really are itching for a beating. In that case, I'll help you loosen those bones of yours." Although the Green God Company prohibited fighting in the upper zone, the company would turn a blind eye to small conflicts in private settings. So long as one did not go too far, the Green God Company wouldn't look too deeply into the matter. After all, disputes were bound to occur wherever people gathered. However, if anyone dared to take things too far, the Green God Company was bound to dish out a severe penalty. In fact, many corporations and forces had gotten banished from the upper zone and suffered an early demise because they had crossed this line. Hence, nobody would dare to openly defy the Green God Company's rules. The next moment, Ikue stomped his right foot on the ground, and his body shot forward like a cannonball. The impact of his feet shook the ground slightly and even left a deep footprint behind on the cement. As his body shot forward, Ikue punched, perfectly integrating his fist speed with the speed of his moving body. His fist generated explosive noises due to this perfect combination as it collided with the air. Evidently, his punch had already exceeded the speed of sound. A sonic boom. He's a Xinyuan grandmaster. When everyone heard the explosive noises, they stared at Ikue in shock. The upper zone's environment allowed one to develop one's physical fitness rapidly. In fact, even developing one's physical fitness to the standard of a Xinyuan master or a half-step Xinyuan grandmaster wouldn't be a problem. However, those who could actually overcome the final hurdle and become a Xinyuan grandmaster were incredibly rare. Even in the upper zone, such people were considered top-tier experts and treated as VIPs by major corporations. These corporations would even be willing to grant a Xinyuan grandmaster the position of elder to rope in such individuals. This was because every Xinyuan grandmaster was no different from a humanoid beast. Hence, everyone couldn't believe that Ikue was serving as a mere butler of a corporation's successor, despite being a Xinyuan grandmaster. Let alone the spectators, even Mushin was astonished by this situation. Only two people weren't surprised by this situation: Lu Tiandi and Ji Luorong. It's over. Ji Luorong reflexively shut her eyes at this sight. She had found out that Ikue was a Xinyuan grandmaster only because Ikue himself had revealed his strength to her during one of their previous meetings. Hence, she knew that Ikue wasn't just an ordinary butler, but was also a terrifying bodyguard. If Shifeng got struck by Ikue's punch, he would be fortunate to leave with only a few broken bones. It wouldn't be strange if he ended up hospitalized for half a month. Boom! The next moment, as if a grenade had exploded, the sound of an explosion echoed throughout the area. Even those standing over a dozen meters away felt the intense impact. Almost everyone present shut their eyes subconsciously. After all, they could easily imagine the outcome that awaited those struck by a Xinyuan grandmaster. If a Xinyuan grandmaster managed to land a square blow, they could kill a bull with one hit. Even a neutralizing grandmaster would end up with broken bones if they got struck by a Xinyuan grandmaster. Meanwhile, the sound of an impact meant that Ikue's punch landed on Shifeng. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. However, when everyone opened their eyes again, they were dumbfounded. How is this possible? At this time, not only was Shifeng completely intact, but he had actually caught Ikue's iron fist with just one hand. Ikue himself was surprised by this situation. He never thought that his punch would meet with such a result. You've made your move. Holding on to Ikue's fist, Shifeng looked at the middle-aged man and asked calmly, "Is it my turn now?" Chapter 2843. Shocking the upper zone. Shifeng's words seemed to stimulate Ikue, the latter's face immediately turning ashen. Ikue was indeed surprised that Shifeng had blocked his punch, but that was merely because he had not expected that Shifeng would actually be a neutralizing grandmaster. Moreover, although his previous punch seemed fierce and domineering, he had actually used only about half of his strength. After all, he would be in big trouble if he created too much of a scene. At that time, even Lu Tiandi wouldn't be able to protect him. However, Ikue never thought that Shifeng would take advantage of this fact and turn him into a laughingstock in the eyes of the crowd. He was a dignified Xinyuan grandmaster. Even the owners of international corporations would have to be polite to him and treat him as a VIP when meeting him. As for neutralizing grandmasters, they could only cower in fear in front of him. He had never once suffered such humiliation before. "You bastard!" Ikue took a step forward and punched with his other hand. Half-step collapsing punch. This time Ikue did not hold back at all. The only thing on his mind was to make Shifeng regret his words. Shifeng responded to this second attack in a similar manner, extending his other hand to catch the punch. He didn't seem to have noticed that Ikue's present punch was different from the one before. Upon seeing this, Ikue sneered. A punch carrying 50% of his strength indeed wouldn't pose a threat to a neutralizing grandmaster. A neutralizing grandmaster could easily block the attack by relying on technique. However, it was a different story for a punch carrying his full strength. A neutralizing grandmaster who tried blocking such an attack would definitely end up with broken bones. Yet, Shifeng was ignorantly trying to receive his punch using the exact same method. Boom! A loud explosion rang out as Ikue's fist collided with Shifeng's palm. The shockwave generated by the impact this time was much stronger than before. Nevertheless, Ikue was still dumbfounded as he looked at Shifeng. This was because the result of his second punch was exactly the same as his first. Shifeng had still caught his fist without fail. Did I subconsciously hold back in fear of getting into trouble? Inevitably, such a thought occurred to Ikue. After all, this was the only reasonable explanation he could think of for this situation. Otherwise, how could a neutralizing grandmaster possibly receive his full-powered punch? However, Shifeng did not give Ikue any time to react at all. Immediately, he pushed Ikue's hands aside and executed a palm strike on the latter's chest. The palm strike was so fast that the attack had already connected with Ikue's chest before he realized what was going on. However, even after noticing the attack, Ikue paid no attention to it at all. As a Xinyuan grandmaster, he had long since developed an instinctual defensive mechanism. Whenever his body received an attack, his muscles would tighten, giving them a toughness resembling steel and neutralizing the attack's impact. If neutralizing grandmasters were proud of their techniques, then Xinyuan grandmasters were proud of their physical body's toughness. In simpler terms, a Xinyuan grandmaster was someone trained to take hits and dish out devastating blows. Even if a Xinyuan grandmaster managed to land only 1 out of 100 attacks on a neutralizing grandmaster, this one attack would end the fight instantly. Boom! Ikue stood steadily even after receiving Shifeng's palm strike. He also looked at Shifeng in silent contempt. Nobody present found it surprising that Shifeng's attack had no effect on Ikue either. This was because Xinyuan grandmasters were precisely this powerful. They were truly monsters in human skin, and trying to harm these monsters with the hands and feet of ordinary humans was an utter joke. This was also why the various major corporations in the upper zone would desperately try to recruit or befriend Xinyuan grandmasters. Kid, I admit that you're strong. However, you can't hurt me. Patting his clothes, Ikue said disdainfully, on the other hand, how long do you think your stamina can hold out against my attacks? A neutralizing grandmaster's ability to exert complete control over their physical body was indeed extraordinary. However, when it came to stamina, a neutralizing grandmaster was far from comparable to a Xinyuan grandmaster. A Xinyuan grandmaster could fight 3 days and 3 nights without rest. In contrast, a neutralizing grandmaster would be fortunate to last even half a day. Hence, neutralizing grandmasters would frequently curse Xinyuan grandmasters as merely a bunch of simple-minded brutes with well-developed bodies. Spectating from the sidelines, Mushin grew worried when she saw this situation. She never thought that Lu Tiandi would have a Xinyuan grandmaster as his bodyguard. The Boulder Corporation had to pay a great price just to get a Xinyuan grandmaster to become one of its elders. Moreover, apart from the Boulder Corporation's master, everyone else in the corporation treated this Xinyuan grandmaster with awe and respect. Yet, Lu Tiandi actually had such a powerful expert working as his henchman. It was ineffective? Shifeng also couldn't help looking at Ikue in surprise. Ever since his concentration had reached the Tier 4 peak standard, his control over his body in the real world had improved by a significant margin. After factoring in his improved physical fitness, he now even dared to apply some of the techniques he used in God's domain in the world. This was also why Shifeng had provoked Ikue. He was very curious to find out where his current limits lay. When Shifeng was catching Ikue's second punch, he hadn't just caught the attack with an open palm. Instead, he had executed 3 rapid palm strikes against Ikue's fist. In other words, he had used the 3 extreme slashes technique, a simplified version of Miracle Dragon's 6 extreme slashes. As Shifeng had executed his 3 palm strikes against Ikue's fist almost in the same instant, it was practically impossible for the human body to tell that it wasn't just 1 but 3 separate attacks. Thus, Shifeng had succeeded in blocking Ikue's full-powered punch. Otherwise, even if his physical fitness had improved a lot after he began living in the upper zone, he would still have to avoid Ikue's full-powered attack. Meanwhile, the offensive palm strike Shifeng executed against Ikue was currently his strongest attack. 4 extreme slashes. From an outsider's perspective, Shifeng's attack would look like an ordinary palm strike. In reality, his attack consisted of 4 palm strikes executed in rapid succession on the same location. This attack placed a heavy burden on his mental strength, and he couldn't use it a second time even if he wanted to. Looking at Shifeng's surprised expression, Ikue smiled. "Kid, now it's my turn to..." Just when Ikue thought to attack again, his body suddenly stiffened, and he collapsed to the ground willy-nilly. His breathing became stifled, and he had difficulty even speaking. In fact, even his vision started to blur. These abrupt changes discombobulated Ikue. He couldn't understand what was happening at all. What the hell did you do to me?" Struggling to lift his head, Ikue gaped at Shifeng in confusion. He simply couldn't wrap his mind around how Shifeng had managed to injure him so severely with just a palm strike. Now, he found even standing up from the ground difficult. The spectators were likewise surprised when they saw Ikue collapse to the ground. He defeated a Xinyuan grandmaster in one strike? Who is this guy? At this time, the onlookers eyed Shifeng as if he were a monster. They even began wondering whether the scene before them was staged. After all, who could possibly believe that a Xinyuan grandmaster would fall from just one palm strike? "I think I know who he is." Some time ago, 2 people managed to pass Yuantian City's mental path together. One of these people was even someone the Boulder Corporation brought in using its reserve slots. According to the rumors, that person was Zero Wings Guild leader Black Flame. Although this guy looks different from God's Domain's Black Flame, they should be the same person. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You what? He's the guy responsible for dragging down the Starline Corporation's Lu Xinglua? Among the crowd, some people who kept tabs on Yuantian City's upper zone recognized Shifeng. For a time, the street bubbled with commotion. Nobody had thought that Black Flame, the mythical sword emperor of God's Domain, would actually appear in their upper zone. Moreover, the man had even defeated a Xinyuan grandmaster with a single palm strike. His strength was simply terrifying. "So he is the Black Flame Big Sis told me about?" Ji Lorong gaped in shock as she looked at Shifeng. After all, Black Flame was currently rumored to be the strongest person in God's Domain right now. He was in existence even the 5 great super guilds had to tiptoe around. Chapter 2844 God's Domain's Black Flame. So that's why he dared to stand against Lu Tiandi. He's the one responsible for Lu Xinglua's removal. Lu Tiandi will probably have to tread cautiously around him. Amazing. As expected of Black Flame. I never thought that he would be the person who received Grade 1 authority in Yuantian City recently. This is interesting. It seems Lu Tiandi has met his match. Everybody present knew of Black Flame, but they did not know much about Black Flame's identity in the real world. After all, they had many things they needed to handle. How could they possibly have the time to look into the real-world identity of every famous expert in God's Domain? Only if they were particularly interested in a specific person would they spend some money to commission a detailed investigation. Not to mention, Black Flame was someone who had never publicly declared his God's Domain identity in the real world. This made it even more difficult to investigate his situation. Only superpowers that paid close attention to Zero Wing would know of Black Flame's identity. While most people did not know of Black Flame's identity in the real world, it was a different story for the name Black Flame itself. This name was far too well known in God's Domain. Not only was this name involved in many iconic battles in the game, but it was also behind the creation of many miracles. In fact, many of Black Flame's battle videos had circulated through the various kingdoms and empires forums and were regarded as a paradigm for swordsmen. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that almost every player operating on the Eastern continent would know Black Flame's name. Needless to say, residents of upper zones like themselves, who were expert players in God's Domain, would definitely know of Black Flame. Although Zero Wing started out as a guild with no backing or background, it was now publicly recognized as a superpower. Compared to the various superpowers that had relied on powerful organizations to gain their strength, the influence Zero Wing had over the public was many times greater. In fact, Zero Wing's influence over the virtual gaming industry almost rivaled the 5 great super guilds already. Zero Wing had already become an absolute titan in God's domain. Thus Ji Luorong felt like she was dreaming when she looked at Shi Feng. While the onlookers were discussing quietly among themselves, Lu Qiandi, who had been silently spectating the situation all this time, suddenly approached Shi Feng. "It seems I have been impolite. I didn't think that you would be Zero Wing's guild leader, Black Flame," Lu Qiandi said as he looked at Shi Feng with a friendly smile. He also gave off an indescribably calm feeling, betraying no anger over Shi Feng having heavily injured his butler. "Hello, my name is Lu Qiandi, the current guild leader of Starlink. You have truly helped me a bunch by defeating Lu Xinglua, guild leader Black Flame. Otherwise, I would most likely have to expend a lot of time and effort to take over Starlink." "No need for thanks. You and I are not allies," Shi Feng retorted nonchalantly. Others might not know about Lu Qiandi, but Shi Feng had a very deep understanding of him. This was because Lu Qiandi had been a well-known Tier 6 God-ranked expert in the past. However, he had not joined any guild. Instead, he had led an adventurer team while working under Starlink. Although Lu Qiandi appeared friendly on the surface, he was deep down a very conniving person. He had toyed with many powers in the past. These powers had worked for Lu Qiandi only to get backstabbed. For this reason, many superpowers had detested Lu Qiandi. However, because of Lu Qiandi's extraordinary strength and his tremorous clown adventurer team, one of God's domain's 7 great dark adventurer teams, none of the various superpowers could do anything against him. Guild leader Black Flame. "Must you be so unapproachable? Lu Xinglua and I are 2 different people. There are many people within the corporation who dislike Lu Xinglua for his overbearing and arrogant attitude as well. However, he is, after all, the patriarch's son. Even if others have an opinion regarding his behavior, nobody dares to say anything. Guild leader Black Flame's dragging Lu Xinglua off his pedestal is an event worth celebrating for the Starlink Corporation," Lu Qiandi said, chuckling. "Since Miss Ji is your friend, Guild leader Black Flame, I will naturally stop trying to recruit her. Also, I have admired Zero Wing for a long time now. May I know if you are willing to form a partnership with me? To present Starlink's sincerity in this partnership and apologize for my rudeness to Miss Ji, I can sell a large batch of phantom potions to you and Miss Ji at cost on behalf of Starlink. May I know what you think of this, Guild leader Black Flame?" At Lu Qiandi's words, everyone couldn't help envying Shi Feng. The phantom potion was something the various major corporations coveted. Let alone at cost, they would even be willing to buy the phantom potion at double or triple the original price. After all, the importance of improving one's mental strength trumped everything else in the upper zone. Ji Luorong was tempted by Lu Qiandi's offer. She currently held only Grade 2 authority in Haitian City's upper zone. If she could acquire a few more phantom potions and improve her mental strength, she might reach Grade 1 authority. At that time, she would have a much easier time operating in the upper zone. After all, only around 300 people held Grade 1 authority in Haitian City's upper zone, and the Green God Company placed heavy importance on every one of them. At that time, even if a corporation in the upper zone wished to target her, they would face incredible difficulty. She also wouldn't be tight for resources, as the tasks offered to Grade 1 authority holders would sometimes award phantom potions. "Thank you for your goodwill, Guild leader Lu, but Zero Wing already has its own collaborators. Currently, Zero Wing has no plans to cooperate with more guilds, so there is nothing I can do about this," Shi Feng said, directly rejecting Lu Qiandi's offer. "If there is nothing else, we will be taking our leave now." "If that's the case, then it truly is a pity." Sighing, Lu Qiandi said, "If you have any intentions of forming a partnership in the future, feel free to contact me anytime, Guild leader Black Flame." Shi Feng responded to these words with just a polite smile. He then turned around and left the training house together with Ji Luorong and Muxin. The spectating crowd also dispersed, leaving Lu Qiandi and Yi Kuei alone. After the crowd dispersed, Yi Kuei made a full recovery after consuming a life potion. Looking at Shi Feng's departing back, Yi Kuei said in a quiet voice, "Young master, Black Flame is simply too arrogant. You already extended such a sincere invitation to him, yet he actually refused to show you any respect. It's no wonder he managed to anger Lu Xinglua that much. Should I find an opportunity to teach that kid a lesson?" Yi Kuei was furious over Shi Feng's successful surprise attack on him. Had he been a little more careful earlier, he definitely wouldn't have suffered such a serious injury. Moreover, he had also noticed that Shifeng looked a little pale after attacking him. Shifeng had probably suffered a significant backlash from his own attack. If that were the case, landing a fatal blow on Shifeng would have been entirely possible. I don't know why, but he seems to be extremely wary of me, although this is clearly our first meeting. It seems it'll be impossible to use him for our own purposes. If that's the case, let's teach him a small lesson. However, I'm afraid you alone won't be enough, Lu Tiandi said, shaking his head. That Shifeng actually managed to execute Miracle Dragon's trademark move in the real world. Evidently, he has reached an incredibly high level in both his physical fitness and mental strength. It'll be tough for you to take care of him by yourself. I'll ask Brother Wang to accompany you. You'll have Mr. Wang come as well? Yi Kuei was momentarily surprised by Lu Tiandi's words. However, he quickly revealed an ecstatic expression and said, "If this is the case, that kid is dead. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." The brother Wang Lu Tiandi mentioned was a Honglian grandmaster, who was only half a step away from becoming a mental strength master. He was also Lu Tiandi's senior brother, and a resident of the upper zone's middle layer. It would be child's play for such an expert to take action against someone living in the base layer. By the way, when you head back, notify the others in the team to take action against Ji Luorong's adventurer team immediately. Make sure to destroy them as quickly as possible, Lu Tiandi instructed calmly. Since I can't have Ji Luorong's adventurer team, there's no reason why I should let Shifeng have it. Rest assured, young master. We have long since been keeping track of those people. If not for your love of talent, they would have been doomed already, Yi Kuei responded, smiling. Nodding, Lu Tiandi then entered the mental strength training house. Chapter 2845 Soon to break seal. Haitian City Upper Zone, Northern Mountain Villa Community. Shifeng couldn't help doubting his eyes as he stared at the 3-story mansion before him. You've been living in this place all this time? Shifeng asked as he looked at Ji Luorong strangely. The mansion before him not only looked luxurious but also occupied an area as large as 2 basketball courts. It was even larger than the Boulder Corporation's mansion in Yuantian City's upper zone, which had cost 30 million trade points to exchange. Meanwhile, Ji Luorong lacked both influence and authority in the upper zone. In fact, she was even living in the upper zone by herself. Apart from her family's corporation operating in the outside world, she did not possess any backers or background whatsoever. Hence, Shifeng found it truly hard to believe that she had managed to purchase such a large mansion. Even Mushin was a little surprised by this situation. After all, the base layer's mansions couldn't be bought by just anyone with sufficient points. Normally, one also needed to have grade 1 authority or above. However, from the information she obtained on Ji Luorong's background, the latter had only grade 2 authority. This is the mansion my maternal grandfather left behind, Ji Luorong said, nodding. Because of my family's decline, we had no choice but to live in the outside world. However, because my mental strength showed promise, my family decided to make use of the reserve slot my maternal grandfather left behind and let me live in the upper zone. Realization immediately dawned upon Shifeng at Ji Luorong's explanation. This also explained why Phoenix Rain had been living in the outside world despite her family having such a large mansion in the upper zone. The upper zone had existed for a long time already. During this period, there had indeed been many families that had fallen into obscurity and were forced to leave the upper zone. After all, the strong preyed upon the weak in the upper zone. Without a reserve slot or sufficient talent in the mental strength department, one would not qualify for residency in the upper zone at all. Through this revelation, Shifeng also realized that the Ji family was indeed extraordinary. Although it was in decline now, the fact that it had managed to acquire such an extravagant mansion in the upper zone proved that it had once been a powerful force there. This also explained how Phoenix Rain managed to rely on her own strength to become one of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's pavilion masters. As Ji Luorong talked about her family circumstances, the group arrived inside the mansion. Upon entering the mansion, Shifeng had to admit that it was indeed much better than his housing unit. Not only was the place much more spacious, but it also provided much greater help toward the improvement of one's mental strength. After entering the mansion, Feng turned the conversation to Ji Luorong's current circumstances and Phoenix Rain's brief reappearance in God's domain after her disappearance. Upon hearing news of her older sister, Ji Luorong breathed out a small sigh of relief. She had been incredibly worried when she found out that her older sister had disappeared. When she heard that her older sister had been brought to Haitian City's upper zone, she had repeatedly searched the base layer for clues of her older sister. Despite her efforts, she had come up empty. The only possibility she could think of was that her older sister had been transferred to the middle layer. Hence, she had been anxiously trying to enter the middle layer to verify her older sister's condition. Hearing that her older sister had once appeared in God's domain after her disappearance, and even expressed that she was safe, had lifted the stone weighing on her heart. Now she could finally relax a little bit. By the way, why did Lu Tiandi come to find you? Do you have any grudges with him? Feng asked curiously as he looked at Ji Luorong. His main goal in coming to Haitian City's upper zone was to check Ji Luorong's situation. After all, he had promised Phoenix Rain to take care of her little sister. Meanwhile, Lu Tiandi wasn't a kind person. Catching his attention was akin to catching the attention of a fox. One was bound to meet with misfortune. I don't have any grudges with him. In fact, today is only our second meeting, Ji Luorong sighed. As for why he is approaching me, it is because he wants Eternal Glory, the adventurer team I established, to join his adventurer team, Tremorous Clown. He wants to annex your adventurer team? Feng was surprised by this answer. Tremorous Clown was an extraordinary dark adventurer team. According to his past knowledge, the team had been active on the Western continent and possessed powerful members. At its peak, the team had even had 3 Tier XS and 9 Tier 5s. Even the various superpowers dared not casually offend the adventurer team. Back then, many experts operating on the dark side of God's domain had sought to join Tremorous Clown. However, only a small minority had succeeded because Tremorous Clown's entry requirement was Tier 4. Normally, only peak experts who had reached Tier 4 could join the team. Feng also knew a little about Ji Luorong's adventurer team since Ji Luorong had also been relatively famous in the past. Although not on the level of the Demon Queen Phoenix Rain, Ji Luorong had still been a bona fide Tier 5 Apex expert, only half a step from reaching Tier 6. Eternal Glory had also been a famous top adventurer team. At its peak, the team had had not only a Tier 6 God-ranked expert, but also 3 Tier 5 experts. However, Eternal Glory was currently merely a well-known adventurer team. Its overall strength was still incredibly weak. This included Ji Luorong, the adventurer team's commander. Feng doubted that the team even had a single Tier 4 player in its ranks right now. Hence, he found it inconceivable that Lu Tiandi wished to annex Eternal Glory. Of course, Feng wasn't looking down on Ji Luorong and her companions. The present Tremorous Clown was far stronger than Eternal Glory. Tremorous Clown probably rivaled the average superpower in the number of its peak combatants. Now that Lu Tiandi had acquired Starlink as well, the overall strength of the forces under his command should be at an astonishing level. My team is indeed incapable of catching Lu Tiandi's attention. The only reason I can think of for his efforts to annex us is the special legacy we obtained, Ji Luorong said after giving the matter some thought. Some time ago, we visited a very special secret land and found a massive world passage sealed there. We even came across a person who might be a Tier 6 god. According to that person, the seal on the world passage would soon break, and the War of Worlds would soon begin. Our team received a special legacy from that person. Recorded inside the legacy was a sealing magic array. If we sacrifice EXP to the magic array, we can isolate a specific area from the rest of the world for a long period. It can be considered a means to resist the War of Worlds. However, at that time, other players aside from our team entered that place as well. In hindsight, those people might have been Tremorous Clown's members. Ji Luorong's words shocked Feng. This was because he had never heard of a War of Worlds happening at this stage of the game in his previous life. However, he also doubted that Ji Luorong was lying. After all, he had visited the ancient god's domain. He wouldn't find it strange if there were other timelines of God's domain. This was especially true after seeing 100 Ghosts as members. Those people clearly didn't come from the ancient God's domain but most likely were from another interstellar continent. This so-called War of Worlds was probably a great war between Earth's players and the said interstellar continent's players. If this was true, it would be a disaster for Earth's God's domain. After all, in terms of resources and experts, the interstellar continent's God's domain was far superior to Earth's God's domain. If the two sides were to wage war against each other, it wouldn't take a genius to imagine that Earth's side would suffer a catastrophic defeat, with many superpowers getting annihilated. Even the present Zero Wing would have a difficult time facing the interstellar continent's offensive. This explained why Lu Tiandi wanted Ji Lurong's adventurer team to join Tremorous Clown. After all, the ability to isolate an area from the outside world would be of significant help to a guild in the upcoming war. When Mushin heard Ji Lurong's words, her complexion darkened. Mushin did not doubt that the War of Worlds would happen. This was because of information Frost Heaven obtained from investigating 100 Ghosts. Previously, she had still been questioning the validity of this information. However, after listening to Ji Lurong's tale, everything made sense. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to be happy about this discovery. Frost Heaven had gone to great lengths to secure one of the reserve seats for God's Domain's 12 great guilds. Yet, just when the guild was about to usher in an era of rapid development, the War of Worlds was about to begin. This was an absolute nightmare for Frost Heaven. However, Mushin felt a little fortunate. If she hadn't chosen to accompany Shifeng to Haitian City's upper zone, she would have most likely remained ignorant about this upcoming world-shaking change. If Frost Heaven did not prepare for the War of Worlds, it wouldn't be strange if the guild got annihilated. While Mushin was pondering Frost Heaven's future, Shifeng looked at Ji Lurong and said earnestly, "Lurong, now that Lu Tiandi has set his sights on you and you have even rejected his offer, with his personality, I'm afraid it won't be long before he takes action against your team. It is no longer suitable for you to remain in Haitian City's upper zone. It will be safer if you move to another upper zone. I have a housing unit in Yuantian City's upper zone. Although it isn't comparable to this mansion, you can still conduct daily exercises there. Would you like to move there?" Shifeng knew Lu Tiandi's personality better than anyone. Lu Tiandi would eliminate anyone he deemed his enemy. With the Starling Corporation's present influence over Haitian City's upper zone, Ji Lurong definitely couldn't live there in peace. Only by leaving Haitian City's upper zone would Ji Lurong escape Lu Tiandi's clutches. Go to Yuantian City's upper zone? Inevitably, Ji Lurong hesitated. However, she also knew that Shifeng was right. Living in Haitian City's upper zone would no longer be safe. "Miss Ji, if you find it inconvenient to live with guild leader Shifeng, you are welcome to live with me. Although the Boulder Corporation isn't as powerful as the Starling Corporation, we have established a solid foundation in Yuantian City's upper zone," Mushin invited. "Miss Mushin, you misunderstand. I don't find it inconvenient. I am already very satisfied to be able to live in Yuantian City's upper zone," Ji Lurong said, shaking her head. "I am just worried about my friends. They don't live in the upper zone. If Lu Tiandi targets them, I'm afraid they won't be able to hide from him for very long. If it were before, when God's domain still didn't hold such great importance to the various corporations, she wouldn't have to worry about the Starling Corporation secretly taking action against her companions. However, the situation was different now. Because of the extreme importance the Green God Company placed on God's domain, the various major corporations now prioritized the game. It wouldn't be strange if they took action against individuals in the real world. In response to Ji Lurong's worries, Shifeng chuckled and said, "That is simple. Just have your friends head to Zero Wing's headquarters. I'll have everything arranged for their stay." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He very much welcomed alliances with experts. Meanwhile, Eternal Glory had plenty of experts in its ranks. Once these players grew up, they would become formidable allies. Sheltering Eternal Glory's members now would only benefit Zero Wing. Moreover, Lei Bao was currently at the half-step Honglian Grandmaster standard already. There was also Fire Dance, who was not much inferior to Lei Bao. Combined with the various top-level security measures set up in Zero Wing's headquarters, even a Honglian Grandmaster would have difficulty making trouble there. After hearing Shifeng's words, Ji Lurong couldn't help rejoicing. Excitedly she said, "Thank you, Guild Leader Shifeng. I assure you that they will listen to all of Zero Wing's arrangements during their stay." The fact that her adventurer team's members could stay in Zero Wing's headquarters was definitely good news. After all, the present Zero Wing was already very strong. Moreover, the various major corporations hadn't been able to do anything against the guild thus far. Hence, her companions should be relatively safe once they moved to its headquarters. After ending her conversation with Shifeng, Ji Luorong promptly contacted her companions and had them hurry to Zero Wing's headquarters immediately. Chapter 2846 Frightening Headquarters. The sun was setting, and the sky was growing darker. Originally, this was a time when countless office workers would be getting off work and going home. However, the lights of Zero Wing Tower remained brightly lit. Compared to the buildings around it, the tower looked much livelier, with many people coming and going from it. There was even a long queue of young men and women waiting outside the entrance to take the basic tests for joining Zero Wing. At this time, a group of several dozen people of various origins and clad in diverse styles suddenly appeared in front of the tower and quietly studied the tall building before them with curious expressions. "So this is Zero Wing's headquarters?" A young man with freckles on his face said in disdain as he looked at the line of young men and women waiting outside the building. "I really wonder what's gotten into the commander. Why does she want us to train in Zero Wing's headquarters all of a sudden?" Although Zero Wing is a powerful guild in God's domain, the number of peak experts it actually has isn't a lot. These people trying to join Zero Wing are obviously newbies as well. I bet they can't clear the trial tower's 3rd floor. Yet, the commander actually wants us to train with Zero Wing? None of the group objected to the youth's derisive remarks. It was evident that they agreed with him. As people who had chosen to join an adventurer team, the thing they disliked the most was being tied down by various restrictions. Hence, they also held players who joined guilds in extreme contempt, considering guild players to be basically weaklings who feared the strong but bullied the weak. In comparison, every member of their adventurer team could become a core member of a guild, even a super guild, should they choose to join one. This was because they had honed their combat techniques through fighting powerful monsters and various outdoor PvPs, without relying on any background or backer. They were completely different from the experts pampered and cultivated by guilds. Moreover, they were also incredibly strong in real-world combat, much stronger than the fighting champions frequently mentioned on TV. This was also why they felt that going out of their way to train with Zero Wing was a complete waste of their time. However, the middle-aged man leading the group shot a glance at the freckled youth and said coldly, "Enough, Tiantong. This is the commander's order. Either you go to Zero Wing or leave the team. Do you wish to leave the team?" The freckled youth named Tiantong no longer dared complain. Although he was still unreconciled to the situation, he did not dare defy the middle-aged man. Similarly, everyone else in the group held their tongue, nobody daring to voice any opinions. This was because this middle-aged man wearing a black shirt was not only Crimson Mask, the Eternal Glory Adventurer Team's vice commander, but also the strongest person in the adventurer team. He was so powerful that even if everyone in their adventurer team, including their commander, Ji Luorong, banded together, they would just barely be able to hold their ground against him. On the Western continent, he was also known to many as Crimson Mask the Demon. In one instance, in order to save a companion cornered by a large guild, he had charged into a map sealed off by an army of 10,000 all by himself. This army had over 1,000 Tier 3 experts, yet not only had this 10,000-man army gotten routed, but none of the 10,000 players had managed to leave the map alive either. After this battle, the nickname Crimson Mask the Demon began to spread across the continent. As a result, Eternal Glory had a much easier time operating out in the fields. Moreover, Crimson Mask possessed an extraordinary identity even in the real world. He used to be very famous in the bodyguard industry. Many international corporations had sought to employ him. However, for some reason, he had suddenly retired as a bodyguard to become a full-time gamer, thoroughly investing his life in God's domain. As for his decision to join Eternal Glory, which had been a weak adventurer team back then, that had simply been an accident. After seeing that everyone had quieted down, Crimson Mask nodded and led the group into Zero Wing Tower's lobby. As soon as Crimson Mask and the others entered the lobby, a beautiful woman with shoulder-length hair and sportswear approached their group. The core member's emblem pinned on her top indicated that she was a member of Zero Wing. When this woman appeared, Eternal Glory's members automatically raised their guard. The expression of Crimson Mask, in particular, turned grave when he saw her. This was because the pressure and presence this woman gave off were simply too powerful. Although the woman did not exude any kind of aura, they couldn't help feeling nervous for some reason when standing in her presence. Faced with this feeling, ordinary people would most likely think nothing of it. However, as players who had fought in numerous life and death battles in God's domain, Eternal Glory's members had long since honed their intuition beyond that of ordinary people. Anyone capable of making them feel nervous definitely wasn't an ordinary person. Eyeing the woman approaching them, Crimson Mask inwardly calculated his chances of winning should he fight her. However, after a round of careful observation, he was surprised to conclude that he had only an even chance of victory, and this was only because his physique was stronger. Could she be Fire Dance, the commander of Zero Wing's main force? No matter how Crimson Mask thought about the situation, this was the only possibility he could think of. Otherwise, he couldn't explain why this woman before him gave him such immense pressure. "You must be Eternal Glory's members, right?" the woman said, smiling as she scanned the group before her. "You can call me Turtle Dove. I've already heard about your situation from the guild leader. Since you have come to Zero Wing, you can treat Zero Wing as your home from now on. Your rooms are ready, so you can go there and rest whenever you want." After saying so, Turtle Dove led Crimson Mask and the others toward the elevator to the residential area. Turtle Dove. While following after Turtle Dove, Crimson Mask and the others revealed confused expressions. This was especially true for Crimson Mask. Before going to Zero Wing's headquarters, he had looked into the peak experts under Zero Wing's command. However, there was no one named Turtle Dove on the list. Even Tier 4 experts don't give off such powerful mental pressure. Could she be one of the trump cards Zero Wing is secretly cultivating? Tiantong was also inwardly surprised when he looked at Turtle Dove. Tiantong had met many experts, but this was the first time he had come across someone capable of giving such powerful pressure in the real world. Moreover, this was merely a pressure Turtle Dove was radiating subconsciously. Only those who had experienced countless harsh battles and training would develop such a temperament and aura. This was something even Crimson Mask had yet to accomplish even now. Crimson Mask was incredibly strong. He could defeat even master martial artists in a few moves. Despite his strength, Tiantong had never felt such pressure coming from the middle-aged man. As the group was waiting to enter the spacious elevator, two men walked out of it. These two men were clad in sportswear similar to Turtle Dove's. They also wore the emblem for Zero Wing's core members on their tops. The instant these two young men appeared, Crimson Mask and the others broke out in a cold sweat. This was because, in their eyes, the two men that just exited the elevator were no different from beasts. Even someone with dull senses would feel a chill crawl down their spine when bathed in the violent auras and oppressive feeling the two men exuded. Moreover, the two were incredibly fit as well. In fact, they were even superior to Crimson Mask. However, the presence of these two young men did not cause any of the Zero Wing members nearby any trouble. Instead, these Zero Wing members acted as if they did not see these two people, with some of them even chatting and laughing among themselves. What's wrong with these people? Tiantong was flabbergasted when he saw the behavior of the Zero Wing members around him. Can they not sense this oppressive feeling at all? Right now, Tiantong felt as if a lion was baring its fangs and claws at him, as if death itself was staring at him. If an ordinary person were subjected to such a feeling for long periods, they might even go crazy. Yet, Zero Wing's members seemed oblivious to this oppressive feeling. Looking at the two departing men, Crimson Mask couldn't help asking Turtle Dove, "Miss Turtle Dove, may I know who those two people are?" The instant those two young men exited the elevator, Crimson Mask had the feeling that he was doomed. This was because both of those young men were evidently stronger than him. If the two of them attacked him together, he wouldn't even have a chance to retaliate. "Their Shadow Sword and Flying Shadow," Turtle Dove answered calmly. "Because they have been improving quite slowly recently. Big Sis Fire has been scolding them a lot. Currently, the two of them must train with Master Lei Bao for 2 hours every day. Otherwise, they will be prohibited from entering God's domain." Slow improvement? Turtle Dove's words rendered Tiantong speechless. She must be boasting. Yes, Turtle Dove is definitely boasting. After all, who could possibly find two guys who are both stronger than Crimson Mask to be lacking? However, when Tiantong and the others finished settling into their rooms and visited Zero Wing's training room, They discovered that Zero Wing's headquarters was basically a den of monsters. This was because they witnessed Shadow Sword and Flying Shadow getting beaten up and yelled at by a sultry beauty dressed in a red t-shirt and shorts. The two young men were utterly incapable of fighting back at all. From an outsider's perspective, it looked as if an adult was beating up two children. While Eternal Glory's members were training in Zero Wing's headquarters, Shifeng's group arrived back in Yuantian City's upper zone. Muxin promptly bade farewell to Shifeng and returned to the Boulder Corporation's mansion. She intended to report the matter of the War of Worlds to the guild and begin preparations for it as soon as possible. As for Ji Luorong, she arrived at Shifeng's residential unit. To her surprise, there were actually two big sisters sharing the residential unit. Neither of these two big sisters was inferior to her older sister in appearance. This was especially true for Gentle Snow. She was basically a goddess who had descended to the mortal world. Moreover, these two big sisters were incredibly strong and knowledgeable in combat as well. When the two of them saw Ji Luorong going through her daily training, not only were they able to point out her flaws in the blink of an eye, but their advice was also easy to understand. Yuantian City's upper zone. In a restaurant a short distance away from Shifeng's residential unit, read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Wu Kuei stood respectfully beside a burly young man and reported carefully, "Mr. Wang, according to my investigation, Black Flame and that little girl are living in that residential area. However, they are currently remaining in their house, so it isn't suitable to take action now. I'm afraid I'll have to waste some of your time." "No need for that much trouble." Chuckling, the youth named Wang Xianming said nonchalantly, "That's merely an ordinary residential area. Besides, it's just teaching a neutralizing grandmaster a lesson. I can just sneak in at midnight. I guarantee that none of the surveillance systems in place will notice me." "Then I'll have to trouble you with that, Mr. Wang." Kuei did not doubt Wang Xuanming's claim. Those surveillance systems might be able to stop him, but they definitely couldn't stop someone like Wang Xianming. Of course, it would be a different story if Shifeng were living in a mansion. Unfortunately, Shifeng was only living in an ordinary residential area, and the level of security in such a place wasn't particularly amazing. Chapter 2847 Den of Monsters? The night was quiet, and the moon hung high in the sky. Apart from the streetlights, no other light source shone in the 6th Southern District. It was evident that the people living in this residential area had already gone to bed. Outside the residential area, Kuei approached Wang Xianming, who was all in black, and reported carefully, "Mr. Wang, all the houses in the residential area have already turned off their lights. Only a few monitoring facilities are still operating there. In addition, we found 32 enforcement robots patrolling the area. They do not follow any set patrol routes." The reason the upper zone was incredibly safe wasn't just the Green God Company's absolute authority in the upper zone. Apart from that, there was also the fact that anyone who had lived here for some time would gain a physique rivaling that of Hunglian masters in the outside world. Moreover, while the upper zone prioritized mental strength above all, every resident living in the upper zone still possessed exceptionally high combat standards. Defeating such people within a short period would be incredibly difficult. Most importantly, enforcement robots constantly patrolled every corner of the upper zone. Not only did these enforcement robots operate using state-of-the-art artificial intelligence, but their bodies were also made of titanium alloy and other special alloys. Even if they received a hit from a cannon of ancient times, they would at most suffer minor damage, although it was highly unlikely that a cannon could ever land a hit on these enforcement robots. This was because these robots possessed inhuman reaction speeds and physiques. Thanks to these factors, they could rival neutralizing grandmasters. Before these enforcement robots, both neutralizing grandmasters and Hunglian grandmasters were nothing. Hence, Hunglian grandmasters dared not take any covert action in the upper zone. At most, they would openly cross hands with their opponents. This frightening technology was exclusive to the Green God Company, and was one reason the various corporations worldwide feared the Green God Company so much. 32. Nodding, Wang Xianming said, "Okay. Give me a map of their general location." Wang Xianming was not the slightest bit surprised to find so many enforcement robots in a residential area. In fact, this number was significantly lower than what mansion districts would boast. Even an ordinary mansion district would have at least 200 enforcement robots on patrol at all times. The security there was truly impeccable. It was only because Shifeng was living in an ordinary residential area that Wang Xianming had an opportunity to take action. Even then, Wang Xianming was only confident of teaching Shifeng a small lesson and heavily injuring him. This was because these enforcement robots were incredibly fast. The first enforcement robot would arrive within 8 seconds of the moment he broke into Shifeng's house. This was also the basic arrangement for ordinary residential areas. Hence, after Wang Xianming factored in the time he needed to escape, he concluded that he only had a very short time to do battle. If he delayed too long and got discovered by an enforcement robot, he shouldn't even think of escaping. As for putting up a fight against the enforcement robots, that was simply suicidal. These are the locations of the 32 robots 10 seconds ago, Ikue said as he transferred the data to Wang Xianming's quantum watch. Immediately, 32 red dots appeared on the map displayed on Wang Xianming's watch. After glancing at the map, Wang Xianming smiled and said, "It seems Xia Qingying is treating this guy quite well. With this distribution, I'll only have 7 seconds to conclude the operation." 7 seconds? Ikue frowned at Wang Xianming's estimate. How about I attract the attention of those robots? There might only be a 1-second difference between 7 seconds and 8 seconds, but a Xinyuan grandmaster could cross a distance of several dozen meters in 1 second. Hence, 1 second was by no means a short period. Relax. Grinning, Wang Xianming said, "Let alone this residential area. I've infiltrated even more dangerous places than this in the past. 7 seconds is more than enough for me already." If an ordinary Xinyuan grandmaster were taking action, 7 seconds would indeed be insufficient for them to injure a neutralizing grandmaster and escape without getting caught. Not to mention, Shifeng was a neutralizing grandmaster who had achieved an incredibly high standard in his mental strength. The control he had over his body was far superior to the average neutralizing grandmasters, which would make teaching him a lesson even more difficult. However, this wasn't a problem for Wang Xianming. After all, he was only half a step away from becoming a mental strength master. The control he could exert over his body was far beyond what an ordinary Xinyuan grandmaster like Ikue could exert. In a situation where Wang Xianming fully exerted himself, he would need only 3 seconds to kill a Xinyuan grandmaster, let alone a neutralizing grandmaster. Besides, his goal was only to injure Shifeng heavily. Ikue did not doubt the man in the slightest. After all, not only was Wang Xianming incredibly famous in Haitian City's upper zone, but Ikue had sparred with him before and suffered defeat after exchanging a single punch. Moreover, after that exchange, his entire arm had gone numb and became paralyzed for a short period, despite Wang Xianming holding back. Before that fight, Ikue had never thought that it would be possible for a person to possess such incredible strength. Wang Xianming's strength could practically rival Superman's. With such strength, it would be child's play for Wang Xianming to teach Shifeng a lesson. After Wang Xianming made some basic preparations, he promptly sneaked into the residential area by himself. Wang Xianming's actions were swift and silent. Despite Ikue keeping a close eye on him, the latter disappeared from his sight after just 3 seconds. Did his control over his body improve even further? Ikue shuddered involuntarily when Wang Xianming disappeared into the coverless residential area. This was the first time he had seen someone with such an astonishing grasp of their body and surroundings. If Wang Xianming decided to take action against him, the consequences would be unprecedented. Ikue felt very fortunate that Lu Tiandi had a good relationship with Wang Xianming. If the two of them were hostile, then as Lu Tiandi's butler-cum-bodyguard, he would definitely suffer a miserable death. While Ikue was in awe of Wang Xianming's capabilities, Wang Xianming successfully evaded the enforcement robots one after another and arrived before Shifeng's residential unit undetected. However, Wang Xianming did not rush to break into the house. Instead, he hid in a corner and silently observed his surroundings, then inspected the distribution of the 32 enforcement robots. He was being so cautious because the only way he could enter the house was by breaking down the door. Hacking the lock system was simply impossible. Meanwhile, the moment he broke down the door, the nearby enforcement robots would take action. Hence, he needed to have a precise grasp of his timing and plan his escape route first. Otherwise, he would definitely get caught. Good. There are 3 escape routes. So long as I can teach that Shifeng a lesson in 5 seconds, I can get out of this residential area scot-free. After planning his escape routes on his quantum watch and conducting some mental simulations, Wang Xianming set his sights on the nearby door. He then put on the helmet he carried, thoroughly concealing his identity. And as soon as he finished mentally preparing himself, he strode forward silently and arrived in front of the door in the blink of an eye. Subsequently, he kicked the door without hesitation. The door deformed, smashed open in an instant. Immediately afterward, the alarm in the house rang, and 6 enforcement robots received the alert almost simultaneously. These 6 enforcement robots then dashed straight for Shifeng's house. Meanwhile, Shifeng, who was logged into God's domain, also received the intruder alert as soon as the alarm sounded, and logged out of the game immediately. His reaction speed was so fast that he completed the entire process in just 1 second. However, for a Xinyuan Grandmaster, 1 second was a long time. Even though the house had a 200 square meter footprint, Wang Xianming still passed through the long corridor and arrived in the middle of the living room in just 1 second. The next moment, just as Wang Xianming entered the 60 square meter living room and was about to charge toward Shifeng's bedroom, he was stunned. This was because he discovered a woman with silky, waist-length hair sitting on the living room sofa. Wearing a snow-white nightgown, she quietly regarded Wang Xianming with eyes that carried neither joy nor sorrow. Looking at the absolute beauty before him, Wang Xianming smiled and said, "Miss, it's bad for your skin to stay up this late." Wang Xianming did not stay surprised for long. This was because the information he had acquired had indicated that Shifeng was living together with 2 women, who appeared to be Zero Wing's vice guild leaders. As Wang Xianming spoke, he did not stop his feet at all. In just a few steps he had already arrived before Gentle Snow. Immediately afterward, he executed footwork and split his body into 3 afterimages. These 3 afterimages then executed a chop at Gentle Snow simultaneously, the chops breaking the sound barrier. Rest up for a week. The 3 chops Wang Xianming executed were lightning fast. Facing this move, even a neutralizing Grandmaster would barely manage to stop 2 of the blows. The next moment, the 3 chops could be seen landing on Gentle Snow's body simultaneously. However, the instant his hand hit Gentle Snow's body, Wang Xianming was stunned. An afterimage. Moreover, before Wang Xianming realized it, another lithe figure had appeared beside him. This figure was none other than Gentle Snow. At this time, Gentle Snow still regarded him with the same emotionless gaze, apparently unaffected by his attack. Damn it! Where did that guy find such a monster? Wang Xianming stared at Gentle Snow in shock and confusion. He also couldn't understand how Gentle Snow could be so powerful despite being so young. Before clashing with Gentle Snow, he already had an inkling that she would be a difficult opponent. Hence, he had gone all out right off the bat to end the fight quickly. However, when he exchanged moves with Gentle Snow, he understood just how terrifying the woman was. No, she's not just terrifying. She's practically inhuman. He could clearly tell that Gentle Snow's physical fitness was only at the standard of Xinyuan masters, which was far inferior to his own. Nevertheless, she had reacted to his attack as if she had long since known what he would do. Moreover, he had even failed to perceive her evasion. While he was executing his earlier attack, the figure he saw sitting on the sofa had merely been an afterimage his mind had fixated on. The moment he began his attack, Gentle Snow herself had already disappeared from the sofa. The ability to evade a Xinyuan Grandmaster's mental perception wasn't something that could be gained overnight. It was a high-level technique that had to be cultivated through rigorous training and countless battles involving life and death. While Wang Xianming might look like a 25-year-old man, he was in reality nearing 35 already. Yet, even at his age, he had just barely touched upon the threshold of this technique. In contrast, not only had this young woman before him learned this technique, but she had also mastered it to the point where she could dodge the attack of a half-step mental strength master with ease. Upon thinking up to this point, Wang Xianming rushed to the door almost immediately. He had no intention of staying here for even a second longer. If he were to clash against such a monster, it would be impossible for him to produce any results within the limited time available. If he stayed any longer, the enforcement robots would catch him. However, when Wang Xianming reached the entrance, he found another lithe figure standing by the door. This person was none other than Aqua Rose. Scram! Looking at the woman dressed in a light blue nightgown before him, Wang Xianming grew enraged. Not only had he failed to accomplish his mission, but there was even a monster behind him. If he wasted any more time here, he would definitely fall into the enforcement robot's hands. Hence, Wang Xianming's first reaction when seeing Aqua Rose was to attack her with everything he had. The next moment, over a dozen fists could be seen punching at Aqua Rose, every punch carrying the full strength of a Xinyuan Grandmaster. Even a Xinyuan Grandmaster would suffer internal injuries and lose consciousness if they got hit by such a barrage of punches. However, Wang Xianming was dumbfounded once he finished executing his attack. When his fists had landed on the woman before him, he felt as if he were shadowboxing. Not only did his attacks fail to repel the woman, but the woman had even moved closer to him. By the time Wang Xianming had executed well over 100 punches, Aqua Rose stood only half a step away from his 2-meter-tall body, her delicate palm smacking his chest. Despite Aqua Rose only executing a gentle strike, Wang Xianming felt an intense pain in his chest. The pain was so unbearable that he stumbled 2 steps back. How is this possible? Wang Xianming gaped at the woman before him in disbelief. A monster. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You another monster. At this time, Gentle Snow arrived behind Wang Xianming and was quietly looking at the burly man. Wang Xianming revealed an incomparably ashen expression as he switched his gaze between Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow, wishing he could kill Yi Kuei. How did that man conduct his investigation? 2 inhuman monsters actually lived inside an ordinary residential unit. Even the security level at the mansion areas couldn't compare to the security of this little house. Chapter 2848 Uproar. At the entrance of the 6th Southern District. 10 minutes have gone by already. Looking at his quantum watch, Yi Kuei smiled in delight. Mr. Wang should be taking action right about now. Yi Kuei did not doubt Wang Xianming's strength in the slightest. If not for the enforcement robots being too powerful, Yi Kuei would have wanted to spectate the fight at a close distance and see how terrified and helpless Shifeng was against Wang Xianming. After all, a neutralizing Grandmaster like Shifeng would be utterly incapable of resisting Wang Xianming's strength. The most he could do was run away. Once Shifeng was taken care of, dealing with Ji Luorong would become a lot easier. Just as Yi Kuei was entertaining such thoughts, a loud noise suddenly came from the residential area. Has he started taking action? Yi Kuei grew excited when he heard the noise, and he couldn't help taking a few steps toward the residential area. Although he knew that the most he would see from his location was Shifeng's building, this was more than enough. He was only curious to find out how many seconds Shifeng would last against a monster like Wang Xianming. 3 seconds, or perhaps 4 seconds. Based on the strength Shifeng had displayed previously, Yi Kuei admitted that the younger man was indeed stronger than himself. However, if it came down to an all-out fight, he would have a great chance of victory. After all, Xinyuan Grandmasters did not possess just incredible defensive capabilities, but also recovery abilities far superior to the average person's. Yi Kuei might have suffered significant damage from Shifeng's palm strike, but he had also recovered from the injury very quickly. One could say that the only advantages Shifeng had over the average Xinyuan Grandmaster were speed and destructive power. However, in front of Wang Xianming, these advantages would be negligible. Hence, Shifeng would probably last against Wang Xianming roughly as long as an average Xinyuan Grandmaster would. After leaving his hiding spot, Yi Kuei immediately noticed Wang Xianming charging into Shifeng's house. Wang Xianming's speed was so fast that Yi Kuei didn't even catch a clear sight of him. However, 2 seconds after Wang Xianming disappeared into the house, he actually reappeared at the entrance. He's done already. Yi Kuei was dumbfounded when he saw Wang Xianming back at the entrance of Shifeng's house. He never thought that Wang Xianming would be so powerful as to end the fight in just 1 second. With such strength, calling Wang Xianming a monster wouldn't be an exaggeration at all. Wang Xianming was on a whole different level from Xinyuan Grandmasters like himself. However, in the next moment, Yi Kuei was stunned once more. A woman wearing a light blue nightgown had actually appeared before the entrance without him realizing it. Meanwhile, as if agitated by this woman's appearance, Wang Xianming promptly launched a flurry of punches at her. Even from several hundred meters away, Ikue could clearly sense the terrifying aura Wang Xianming exuded. Madness, violence, destruction. Nobody could possibly survive Wang Xianming's chaotic punches. As he lost his mind, Ikue was horrified. If Wang Xianming had simply taught Shifeng a lesson and landed the latter in the hospital for several months, the Green God Company wouldn't look too deeply into the matter. At most, it would strengthen the residential area's security and give Shifeng some compensation. However, if Wang Xianming took a life in the upper zone, he would touch the Green God Company's bottom line. At that time, the company would definitely conduct a thorough investigation into the matter until it found the culprit. Once Wang Xianming was caught, even the big shots living in the middle layer wouldn't be able to help him. In fact, he might even drag down Lu Qiandi and Ikue as accomplices. However, before Ikue could recover from his shock, he received yet another jolt. This time, his eyes nearly fell out of their sockets. This was because the woman dressed in a nightgown actually remained unscathed despite facing Wang Xianming's flurry of punches. She even moved closer and closer to Wang Xianming, and eventually planted a palm on his chest. The instant the woman's blow landed, Wang Xianming actually stumbled 2 steps back and clutched his chest in pain. He also stared at the woman before him with fear in his eyes. Who is she? Why did such a monster appear in Shifeng's house? Ikue was shocked and confused as he looked at Aqua Rose, who stood in the corridor outside Shifeng's house. He even rubbed his eyes to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Wang Xianming, an incredibly powerful Xinyuan grandmaster, had actually lost to a frail woman. As Ikue gaped in shock, Wang Xianming added to Ikue's confusion by charging forward and attacking Aqua Rose once more. He actually showed no signs of trying to escape from another location. However, Ikue quickly noticed that another woman of extraordinary beauty had walked out of the house. This woman was similarly dressed in a snow-white nightgown and had silky black hair flowing down to her waist. Under the illumination of moonlight, she looked just like a goddess that had descended to the mortal world. Although this woman did not exude an imposing aura, the indifference in her eyes combined with Wang Xianming's strange behavior allowed Ikue to guess what was going on. Most likely, the woman behind Wang Xianming was a monster as well. Hence, he did not choose to enter the house and break out from another location. After all, if Wang Xianming were to fight inside the more spacious house, he would have to face those 2 monstrous women simultaneously. No matter how powerful Wang Xianming was, he definitely wouldn't have any opportunity to escape under such circumstances. Hence, he could only choose to fight in the narrow hallway and risk a pincer attack. However, contrary to Wang Xianming's expectations, Gentle Snow had no intention of double-teaming him. She simply stood aside and quietly looked at the broken door, appearing quite bothered about it. In other words, the broken door seemed much more important to Gentle Snow than Wang Xianming was. On the other side, Aqua Rose treated Wang Xianming's series of desperate attacks as if they were child's play. Not only did she evade all of them effortlessly, but she also landed another palm strike on Wang Xianming, aggravating his injuries. Their clash continued for 4 seconds. At this point, Wang Xianming could no longer stand steadily, so weakened that even a Xinyuan grandmaster could go up against him. Trying to escape in such a condition was a luxury he couldn't afford. Before Wang Xianming could launch another round of attacks against Aqua Rose, the alerted enforcement robots finally arrived at the scene. After distinguishing everyone's identities, the enforcement robots promptly took Wang Xianming into custody. Once arrested by the enforcement robots, even a Xinyuan grandmaster would have no chance of putting up a struggle. As Ikue watched Wang Xianming's capture, he noticed Gentle Snow walking out of the house and looking in his direction. Fear seized Ikue's mind, and goosebumps rose all over his body. He instinctively turned around and fled immediately. She shouldn't have seen me. I was so far away and I even had my aura concealed. Even if she's a monster, she shouldn't have discovered me. Ikue reassured himself this way as he fled. He repeatedly told himself that he was merely imagining things. Only after Ikue had left Yuantian City's upper zone did he finally calm down from receiving Gentle Snow's attention. That was too damned scary. How can such a monster exist in this world? Chills crawled down Ikue's back when he recalled Gentle Snow's indifferent gaze. I need to have the young master report this matter to the higher-ups immediately. Those monsters aren't things we can offend. Those two women simply aren't human. As Yi Kuei was fleeing Yuantian City's upper zone, Xia Qingying, the base layer's general manager, arrived at Shifeng's residential area together with several supervisors. Who's the fool who would actually dare assault someone in a residential area? Luo Hanbin frowned as he looked at the broken door before him. It had already been several years since a home assault had happened in Yuantian City's upper zone. The previous occasion had greatly angered the Green God Company. Although the victim had sustained only heavy injuries, not only had the offender gotten banished from the upper zone forever, but he was even imprisoned for 10 years once outside. Now that another occurrence had taken place, even if the Green God Company's executives didn't say anything, the managers of Yuantian City's upper zone definitely wouldn't spare the offender. However, when Luo Hanbin entered the house and saw Wang Xianming being held in place by two enforcement robots, his eyes nearly fell out of their sockets. Wang Xianming, a peerless genius of Haitian City's upper zone. Wang Xianming was a big shot who was only half a step away from becoming a mental strength master. Even a supervisor like Luo Hanbin had to act politely around him. Meanwhile, with Wang Xianming's strength, he could rank within the top 3 of Haitian City's upper zone's base layer. The man even had a mental strength master as his teacher. With all these conditions, he was almost certain to become a permanent resident of the middle layer. Let alone Luo Hanbin, even Xia Qingying was shocked. Originally, she had expected the offender to be an ignorant punk. She never imagined that the offender would be a peerless genius of Haitian City's upper zone. She also couldn't help wondering how Shifeng had apprehended Wang Xianming. With Wang Xianming's skills, Xia Qingying had only a slight edge over him. She couldn't guarantee she would win if they clashed. And if Wang Xianming focused solely on escaping, even she wouldn't be able to hold him down for 7 or 8 seconds. Looking at Shifeng sitting on the living room sofa, Xia Qingying blurted out, "You sure know how to surprise people. The last time you broke the mental paths record. Now you even brought down Haitian City's Wang Xianming." Smiling bitterly, Shifeng said, "An accident. This really is an accident. I never thought that a big shot from Haitian City's upper zone would actually take action against me out of the blue." From the time Wang Xianming had broken into the house and until his apprehension, Shifeng hadn't done anything. He had been a spectator all the while. He also never expected an expert like Wang Xianming to attack him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You not wishing to reveal Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose's matters for the time being. He did not dispel Xia Qingying's misunderstanding. All right then. Seeing that Shifeng didn't intend to continue speaking, Xia Qingying said, "Now that Wang Xianming has been arrested, the Green God Company will definitely punish him. Even his teacher won't be able to do anything about it. However, his teacher is incredibly protective of his students. While he might not be able to do anything about Wang Xianming's punishment, he is sure to pick a fight with you. Although we will strengthen the security of this area, you should still be careful. It's best if you don't leave the residential area for the time being." Even base layer general managers like herself would have a headache dealing with the anger of a mental strength master, let alone Shifeng, who held only grade 1 authority. "Thank you for your warning, General Manager Xia," Shifeng said, nodding. Shortly after Xia Qingying's group left with Wang Xianming, word of Wang Xianming's assault on Shifeng's house spread like wildfire. Even though it was already midnight, everyone in Yuantian City's upper zone still quickly received news of it. Chapter 2849 Hong Xinyuan's choice in one of Yuantian City's upper zone's mansion districts. "Uncle Hong, did something happen? Why did you suddenly call for me?" Muxin asked in confusion as she looked at Hong Xinyuan, who was standing by a French window and looking at the night view outside. She was just about to explore an ancient ruin. She had gathered her subordinates already. If she were lucky, she might discover a Tier 4 legacy land or a legacy guidance there. These things were incredibly important for the current Frost Heaven. The War of Worlds would be starting soon. Although her investigation had turned up very little information about the war, she had managed to deduce that they would face players of another world. At that time, the only options left for them would be to conquer or be conquered. It would be different from when players of other worlds entered the main continent. There would be no third option available to them. Hence, Frost Heaven needed to make as many preparations as possible before the War of Worlds began. Naturally, increasing the number of Tier 4 players the guild had was a top priority. Kurue, who stood beside Mushin, was also confused by Xinyuan's summons. She had just fallen asleep, yet before she could get any rest, she was rudely roused out of bed. Hence, she was still incredibly sleepy and wanted nothing more than to crawl back into her bed right now. "Take a look for yourselves," Xinyuan said as he passed a document to Mushin and Kurue. The document was none other than a summary of Xinyuan's home assault in the 6th Southern District. How is this possible? Mushin couldn't help doubting her eyes when she read the report. She had heard of Haitian City's upper zone's Wang Xianming. An expert of his caliber could definitely rank as the number 1 or number 2 expert in the base layer of Yuantian City's upper zone. If such an expert decided to take covert action, even the Boulder Corporation would be powerless. All the corporation could do was have its members take shelter in its mansion temporarily. Nevertheless, Wang Xianming had not only failed in his attack on Shifeng but even gotten apprehended. How could anyone possibly believe this? He was actually that powerful? After reading the report, Kurue was now wide awake. Simultaneously, a hint of confusion had appeared in her eyes. Everything is as the report states. Looking at Mushin's surprised expression, Xinyuan said, "I have to admit that I indeed underestimated Shifeng. It seems that he has kept a lot more secrets than we thought." After pondering on the matter for a moment, Mushin asked, "Uncle Hong, do you mean for us to deepen our relationship with Zero Wing?" "That's right. You already know what's coming in the future. When the war begins, even superpowers will have difficulty surviving. If we wish to survive, thoroughly solidifying our alliance with Zero Wing will undoubtedly be a good choice," Xinyuan said, nodding. "I also plan to sell some of the corporation's phantom potions and life potions to Zero Wing. These should be what Zero Wing lacks the most right now." "I understand. I'll contact Zero Wing immediately." Mushin nodded and promptly left the living room. Kurue snapped out of her daze. Looking at Xinyuan, she asked, "Uncle Hong, do we need to go to such lengths?" If Xinyuan were merely trying to form a strategic alliance with Zero Wing, then she could still accept such a decision. After all, the present strength and potential Zero Wing had displayed far exceeded those of the various superpowers. In fact, Zero Wing might even become in existence rivaling the 5 great super guilds. The only things the guild lacked now were time and talents. However, Xinyuan's decision to sell some of the Boulder Corporation's phantom potions and life potions to Zero Wing greatly confused her. These items served as the foundation for the various corporations. Even the successors of major corporations could get their hands on only a limited number of them. "You don't understand. Wang Xianming isn't someone who can be defeated so easily. The cards and secrets Shifeng has hidden are absolutely extraordinary." Shaking his head, Xinyuan said, "Deepening our relationship with him now will be beneficial for both the corporation and you two sisters." In reality, apart from Shifeng's great potential, another reason behind Xinyuan's decision to go to such lengths to befriend Shifeng was an astonishing piece of information Xia Qingying had leaked to him. Shifeng wasn't the person who defeated Wang Xianming. Xinyuan knew that Wang Shuaming's combat power was only slightly beneath Xia Qingying's. Hence, defeating Wang Xianming was an incredibly challenging proposition. Needless to say, defeating him in just a few seconds would be even more difficult. Only the big shots living in the upper zone's middle layer could defeat Wang Xianming that fast. If the Boulder Corporation could befriend such big shots, it would bring much greater benefits to the corporation than simply silently developing its foundations on the base layer. At the same time, inside a mansion in the distant Haitian city's upper zone, "Young master, what should we do?" Ikue asked in a worried tone as he looked at Lu Tiandi, who had just exited his gaming cabin. "Yuantian City's upper zone has already apprehended Mr. Wang. If your teacher blames you, Wang Xianming was a bona fide peerless genius. Finding a student like him was difficult, even for the middle layer's big shots. Now that Wang Xianming had been caught conducting a home assault, he would definitely be banished from the upper zone. Without the upper zone's various resources, any further improvements would be utterly impossible for him." After hearing Ikue's report, Lu Tiandi smiled and said, "We don't need to do anything. Although the outcome is different from what I imagined, things are still progressing according to plan. Now all we need to do is sit back and wait. Wang Xianming had always been their teacher's favorite pupil, receiving the best resources available. Hence, Lu Tiandi had always gotten shortchanged in terms of resources. If not for Lu Xinglua suffering a major failure, his teacher wouldn't have started placing importance on Lu Tiandi at all. Lu Tiandi's original plan had Wang Xianming and Shi Feng forming a grudge against each other. In his opinion, with Shi Feng's abilities and potential, Wang Xianming probably couldn't do anything significant to Shi Feng. Once Wang Xianming failed in his attack, Shi Feng would definitely retaliate and create a lot of problems for Wang Xianming. Naturally, Wang Xianming wouldn't sit still and would retaliate against Shi Feng as well. Shi Feng had exceeded Lu Tiandi's expectations and defeated Wang Xianming. However, this was not bad news for Lu Tiandi. In fact, this was the outcome he hoped to see the most. After all, not only would Wang Xianming get banished from the upper zone now, but Shi Feng would also earn the ire of their teacher. Once their teacher retaliated, Shi Feng would most likely be forced to leave the upper zone. In fact, he might even disappear from the world altogether. At that time, Lu Tiandi could plan on taking over Zero Wing. According to plan? Ikue shuddered involuntarily when he saw Lu Tiandi's indifferent smile. He never thought that Lu Tiandi would scheme against even Wang Xianming. Ignoring his butler's reaction, Lu Tiandi said, "All right, move along. I still need you to take care of Ji Luorong's group in God's domain." "Yes, sir." Ikue responded in a hurry. Although he had long since known that those who stood in Lu Tiandi's way would never have a good ending, he still got frightened when he saw one of Lu Tiandi's schemes coming to fruition. Meanwhile, after Wang Shuaming's assault, Yuantian City's upper zone arranged for Shi Feng's group to live in a better residential unit. Xia Qingying had an enforcement robot station near Shi Feng's new house long-term to prevent a similar situation from occurring. As icing on the cake, the Green God Company gifted 10 phantom potions and 10 life potions to Shi Feng as compensation. However, Shi Feng did not feel happy at all in this situation. On the contrary, he even felt slightly pressured. Now that Wang Xianming is in custody, his teacher definitely won't spare me. Even with an enforcement robot guarding the house 24/7, it'll probably be difficult to stop the retaliation of a mental strength master. As Shi Feng studied the information Xia Qingying supplied him, his head ached. Fu Jiuzhong, Wang Shuaming's teacher, was no ordinary individual. He was an expert that ranked at the top even in the middle layer and wielded incredible authority. He even had influence over several corporations operating in Yuantian City that rivaled the Boulder Corporation in scale. If Fu Jiuzhong began targeting Shi Feng would most likely have difficulty acquiring resources from Yuantian City's base layer. Although it is still a little early, it seems I have no choice but to take on the Divine Dragon's trial. Even now, Shi Feng still wasn't confident of completing Auerbach's trial. This was because a Tier 4 Divine Dragon was much stronger than an ordinary Tier 4 dragon. Even Tier 5 existences were unlikely to be a match for a Tier 4 Divine Dragon. Originally, Shi Feng had planned to challenge the trial only after further improving his mana body. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. However, it seemed that he had no choice but to push his plans forward. It was of utmost importance that he completed the Divine Dragon's trial now. This was because only by completing Auerbach's trial would he become the Divine Dragon's true companion. If that happened, Zero Wing could thoroughly solidify its position on the Western continent, and the Starlight Fortress could serve a much greater purpose. At that time, Zero Wing would be able to not only recruit talents from the Western continent in large numbers, but also acquire large amounts of 7 Luminaries crystals. After all, a Heaven Mode regional dungeon produced an astonishing amount of 7 Luminaries crystals. With the 7 Luminaries crystals he acquired, he would then be able to exchange for a bunch of phantom potions and life potions. Only by securing phantom potions and life potions in bulk could he achieve a breakthrough in his mental strength in the real world and his concentration in God's domain. After returning to his room, Shi Feng promptly consumed a phantom potion and a life potion. He then lay in his fearless cabin and logged into the game. Chapter 2850 Divine Dragon's Trial. Zero Wing City, Zero Wing's residence. After Shi Feng came online, the first thing he did was assign tasks to Liang Jing and Yulan, particularly the distribution of the Tier 3 mana set equipment he had produced. He had made more than 200 of these sets, and he tasked Yulan with secretly gathering a batch of Tier 3 experts who could equip them. Once these experts were geared with the Tier 3 mana set equipment, Zero Wing would gain an additional trump card. Although the modified Tier 3 mana set equipment wasn't as powerful as the original version, there was only a 15% decrease in the basic attributes it provided. A Tier 3 player equipped with the modified set could still go up against mythic monsters of the same level. In addition, Shifeng passed the Treasure of Fire to Melancholic Smile, and had her procure as many mysterious flames as possible. They could offer the Seeds of Flame converted as an award for the Candlelight trading firm's forgers and alchemists. By doing so, they could not only increase Candlelight's productivity, but also attract more lifestyle players to join the firm. After all, a lifestyle player's promotion was largely influenced by their production success rates. When Melancholic Smile received the Treasure of Fire from Shifeng, she was shocked. Then, uncontrollable excitement welled up inside her. She had always had a passion for mysterious flames. However, incredibly powerful mysterious flames weren't easy to find. And even when the guild did find some, she didn't have the ability to make it her own. Thus, the mysterious flame she currently used was only a Tier 2 mysterious flame. No lifestyle player had managed to absorb either of the two Tier 3 mysterious flames sitting in the guild warehouse even now. However, the Purification Crown resolved the hurdle preventing lifestyle players from absorbing stronger mysterious flames, and could even produce mysterious flames using various types of flames. Melancholic Smile could already envision the swarms of lifestyle players fighting to join the Candlelight trading firm. At that time, be it the construction of the Crimson Dragon flying ships or another mobile fortress, Candlelight wouldn't have to worry about lacking talents and manpower. At the same time, with Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose's return, Zero Wing no longer lacked apex combatants to protect it. Hence, Shifeng tasked Fire Dance with secretly gathering information on the 7 treasures and collecting them directly, if possible. The 7 treasures were not only crucial for his quest, but their various supportive functions were simply heaven-defying, providing incredible help to both individuals and guilds. Previously, when players in God's domain were still low-leveled and weak, the likelihood of them encountering the 7 treasures was low. However, now that more and more Tier 4 players had begun appearing, the chances of players stumbling over the 7 treasures were much greater. Not to mention, the present Zero Wing was already far stronger than before. After its recent rapid development, Zero Wing now had more than 50,000 Tier 3 players under its command, a number that rivaled what the various superpowers had. In addition, the number of partners Zero Wing had continued to increase. Recently, Frost Heaven had thoroughly solidified its alliance with Zero Wing, drastically increasing Zero Wing's influence on the eastern continent. At this point, Zero Wing could expand its territory already. Hence, his hunt for the 7 treasures was no longer an impossible task. Moreover, he had to get his hands on the 7 treasures to elevate Zero Wing's strength further. This was because only by gathering all of the 7 treasures could he fully utilize their power. In fact, the 7 treasures could even suppress the Endless Abyss. If Zero Wing could acquire this power, thoroughly making an enemy out of the 5 great super guilds wouldn't be a problem. It also wouldn't have to fear the invasion of other gods' domains. After Shifeng finished assigning tasks, he promptly teleported to the Starlight Fortress to take on the Divine Dragon's trial, so that he could solidify Zero Wing's position on the western continent. At that time, even if the World Seal broke and the War of Worlds began, Zero Wing would have the ability to defend itself against the attacks of the foreign gods' domain's powers. Western Continent, Starlight Fortress. The summoning array at the top of the summoning tower lit up, and Shifeng appeared in the summoning hall a moment later. Standing atop the summoning tower, Shifeng had a full view of the Starlight Fortress's situation. At present, the Starlight Fortress was no longer the same as before. Not only had the number of players visiting the fortress increased massively, but even the weakest among them was at Tier 3. There were even quite a number of Tier 4 experts roaming the streets. After briefly scanning the fortress, Shifeng discovered at least 10 Tier 4 players, nearly outnumbering what Zero Wing City had. If not for the Divine Dragon's presence, even if the Starlight Fortress had Divine Tribe and Netherworld Empire's assistance, it would still be very difficult to keep all these players in check. not to mention the large number of visiting NPCs and NPC forces greedily eyeing the fortress. Yet, due to the Silver Divine Dragon, these players and NPCs had no choice but to lie low. After checking the fortress's situation, Shifeng went to the Summoning Tower Summoning Altar, which was also the Silver Divine Dragon's resting place. When Shifeng arrived in the spacious Summoning Altar, what greeted him was the sight of a miniature version of the Silver Divine Dragon Auerbeck. The Divine Dragon, which was only around a dozen meters in length, was sleeping quietly in the middle of the room. At this time, Auerbeck had already reached level 164. The aura it released now was on a whole other level. It was also much stronger than the dragon Shifeng had slain in the ancient god's domain. In fact, Shifeng found it quite difficult to stand in the aura Auerbeck exuded. If an ordinary tier 4 player were in his place, they wouldn't even be able to approach the Divine Dragon. Looking at the fully recovered Silver Divine Dragon, Shifeng gained further understanding of Divine Dragons. He had to admit that Divine Dragons truly weren't existences humans could offend. Despite Auerbeck being only at the tier 4 mythic rank, it was still strong enough to defeat ordinary tier 5 existences. As for tier 4 existences, they were nothing but ants in front of a tier 4 Divine Dragon. Little human, you've come. Auerbeck woke up upon sensing Shifeng's arrival. Looking at Shifeng with its golden eyes, it said in satisfaction, "It seems you have made your preparations to challenge the trial." "Yes, esteemed Divine Dragon," Shifeng agreed, nodding. Both his mana body and concentration standards had already reached a bottleneck, and it was unlikely he could make a breakthrough within a short time. If he wished to elevate his strength further, the only way to do so would be by obtaining a legendary weapon or equipment. However, this evidently wasn't a feasible plan, as every legendary weapon and equipment required a lot of time and manpower to acquire. Good. Since you're confident in taking on the trial, I will let you challenge it as per our previous agreement. However, let me make this clear. You only have 3 opportunities. If you fail to pass the trial in 3 tries, the contract between us will be dissolved, Auerbeck said as it rose from the ground. As for the trial you will be undertaking, it is the trial that has been passed down through generations among the dragon race. Originally, this trial was created for dragons. However, since you wish to become my companion, you will have to complete the Tier 4 Infant Dragons trial at the very minimum. A trial for Tier 4 Infant Dragons? Shifeng was astonished by Auerbeck's words. Although he had long since known that the Divine Dragons trial wouldn't be simple, it would seem that he had still underestimated it. A Tier 4 Infant Dragon could fight even Tier 5 existences. Yet, he was supposed to face a trial created for Tier 4 Infant Dragons. I will teleport you to the Dragon Temple. Remember, you will not be able to use external tools there. You must rely on your own strength to conquer the trial. If you die within the trial, you will be teleported back here automatically. After saying so, Auerbeck began chanting an incantation in Dragon Tongue, generating divine runes around Shifeng one after another. 5 seconds later, Shifeng was cocooned in countless golden divine runes. He then transformed into a streak of light and disappeared from the summoning altar, leaving Auerbeck by itself in the spacious room once more. After briefly getting dazzled by runes, Shifeng gradually recovered his sight and found that he stood before a majestic temple. The temple was tens of thousands of meters tall, and it looked like a huge mountain. Even a dragon would appear tiny in front of this temple, let alone a human. As soon as Shifeng walked up to the 1,000-meter-tall door before him, an ancient and deep voice suddenly rang out in his mind. A human? No, you're not a human. How interesting. Auerbeck actually sent you here to take the trial? Along with this voice, the phantom of a gigantic dragon gradually faded into view before Shifeng. This dragon was well over 1,000 meters tall, and when it appeared, Shifeng immediately felt stifled. For a moment, he wondered if he was standing before a Tier 6 god. It seems that little fellow has a really favorable opinion of you to actually let you take the trial, the dragon said as it looked at Shifeng. Smiling, it continued, very well. I will abide by the old contract since Auerbeck has sent you here. You should prepare yourself. You might not be able to pass this trial, but if you do your best, you will still receive great benefits, so make sure to cherish this opportunity. After the dragon finished speaking, Shifeng found that the view in front of him had changed completely. Now what was before him wasn't a massive temple, but a broken bridge covered in gray mist. Meanwhile, he was currently standing on this broken bridge, and he could vaguely make out land in the distance. The instant the gray mist enveloped him, Shifeng was stupefied. Eternal energy. No. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU to be precise. It's eternal energy condensed into a mist form. The moment the gray mist enveloped Shifeng, his mind felt refreshed like never before. Numerous ideas constantly emerged from the depths of his brain, and he could also view the operating principles of the mana surrounding him with unprecedented clarity. Before Shifeng could recover from his shock, the dragon's deep voice echoed in his mind once more. Repair the broken bridge using mana. So long as you repair 1/3 of the bridge, you will pass the trial. Your time limit is 3 days. However, for every 300 meters you progress, the time limit will get extended by an additional day. If you fail to repair 1/3 of the bridge when your time runs out, you will have failed the trial. When the dragon finished speaking, Shifeng heard rocks breaking off somewhere nearby. Turning toward the sound source, he found that the bridge's broken end was continuously crumbling. At this rate of collapse, let alone 3 days, the remaining portion of the broken bridge would disappear completely in just a few hours. And once the bridge disappeared, he would plunge into the endless darkness below. Chapter 2851, Mana Reconstruction. What an amazing bridge! When Shifeng spread his senses across the broken bridge, he was astounded. This was because this bridge was actually made entirely of mana that had solidified. Although this mana was solid, it was akin to sand. He could walk on this bridge without it collapsing like a sandcastle, only because of special mana constructs holding the grains of sand together. After thinking up to this point, Shifeng promptly extended his mana domain to take control of these mana constructs and prevent the bridge from collapsing any further. However, the instant he did so, he was stunned. Manipulating solidified mana, is this taxing? Shifeng had plenty of experience manipulating mana that had condensed into a mist or liquid. In fact, he could control liquid mana as if it were his own arms. Yet, when he tried manipulating only a small bit of solid mana, he felt as if he was trying to move arms that had been injected with lead. Not only was the process incredibly strenuous, but even the slightest distraction meant immediately losing control of the mana. Meanwhile, the difficulty of maintaining the entire bridge's integrity was akin to holding up a weight of tens of tons. Not to mention, he also had to have this solid mana move according to his will to reconstruct the collapsed portion of the bridge. Looking at the continuously collapsing bridge, Shifeng finally understood just how difficult this trial was. Let alone reconstructing the bridge, just keeping the bridge from collapsing any further was already a monumental task. As Shifeng racked his brain over how to prevent the bridge from collapsing, the phantom of a gigantic dragon was quietly observing him in a distant cloud of mist. His grasp on mana is too immature. Let alone 3 days. He won't last even 3 hours at this rate. After taking a look at Shifeng's understanding and control over mana, the dragon shook its head and wings, disappearing silently from the mist. Time passed quickly. Now, less than half of the broken bridge, which was originally over 20 meters long, remained. Moreover, the bridge's rate of collapse was even accelerating as it grew shorter. This won't do. At this rate, the entire bridge will be gone in less than half an hour. I need to think of a way to stabilize a small portion of the bridge first. Shifeng had a headache as he looked at the collapsing bridge. He gave up on manipulating the entire bridge and chose to secure only a 2-meter length of the bridge. This was also the maximum amount of solid mana he could currently manipulate. Any more in the solid mana would challenge his control. Everything progressed just as Shifeng expected. In less than 20 minutes, the portion of the bridge he had given up on collapsed completely, and only the 2-meter stretch under his feet remained relatively stable. Even so, this small portion was still disintegrating gradually. How strange. Shifeng stared in confusion at the drastically slower collapse. The mana constructs that had been keeping the bridge together before clearly had their mana supply cut off and operation stopped after I arrived. However, the bridge's initial rate of collapse was much slower than when I started controlling it. The rate of collapse accelerated afterward. When he saw the broken bridge starting to collapse right after he appeared, He thought it signaled the start of his trial and represented his time limit. However, when he began manipulating the solid mana, he realized that he had been mistaken. The mana constructs keeping the bridge together had simply stopped operating, so the solid mana would naturally try to revert to its original form. Is there something wrong with my manipulation method? Shifeng couldn't help entertaining such a question. However, he promptly shook his head and denied this thought. No, I was simply manipulating the solid mana according to the original mana constructs. There shouldn't be a problem with my manipulation method. Otherwise, the entire bridge would have collapsed instantly instead of breaking apart bit by bit. A mana construct was similar to a magic array. If one did not use the appropriate method to manipulate a magic array, it would not activate. This was also the case for mana constructs, except mana constructs were much more fragile than magic arrays, crumbling if manipulated incorrectly. Due to his understanding of mana constructs, Shifeng had to wonder what exactly he had done wrong in preventing the bridge's collapse. Due to the eternal energy surrounding him, Shifeng's mind was operating with unprecedented clarity and activity. Numerous ideas came to mind, and he considered the issue from various perspectives. When less than 1 meter of the bridge remained, Shifeng's eyes suddenly widened in realization. I see. I've been doing things wrong from the very beginning. I shouldn't have tried to force the mana. Whether manipulating my own mana or the ambient mana, I should guide it down the desired path instead of compelling it to do so. While forcing mana does produce some results, mana has its own operating principles. Not only is forcing mana strenuous, but the bridge's mana will also conflict with my own mana. Upon thinking up to this point, Shifeng immediately began guiding his own mana into the mana constructs holding the broken bridge together. He no longer compelled it to enter the mana constructs. However, guiding mana was much more difficult than he had thought. This was because the mana in the environment was heterogeneous. Even his own mana was composed of various types of mana. Needless to say, trying to guide all these diverse types of mana to do the same thing was an impossible task. This meant that he had to refine and separate the different elements of mana in his body and have them do different things. Originally, accomplishing such a refinement would require a lot of time. After all, the disparate elements of mana in his body were all intermixed. Just separating them would already drive countless expert players to despair. To put this task into perspective, one could imagine a player's mana body as a box filled with millions of marbles of different colors, and these marbles represented mana of different elements. If players wanted to use a specific type of mana within their bodies, they would have to sort through all of these marbles and take out the ones they wanted to use. Doing so would be incredibly difficult and time-consuming. Not to mention, a mana body was much more complex than a box of marbles, which would further add to the difficulty. Fortunately for Shifeng, he had acquired a Saint's Legacy. Although the Ice World Saint's Legacy focused more on the ice element, the legacy had provided an introduction to the other elements. Thank goodness that Saint Legacy mentioned the various elements of mana. Otherwise, I likely wouldn't have any hope of completing the trial this time. Shifeng couldn't help smiling bitterly as he sensed the jumbled mana flowing within his body. Previously, when he made use of mana, he did not bother segregating it at all. He simply used it as it was and didn't find any problem with it. Now, however, he realized that his past actions had thoroughly mixed up the various types of mana in his body and made them even more difficult to separate. Separating the various types of mana in his body without knowing their basic properties would be akin to sorting a box of colorful marbles while colorblind. That would be mission impossible. Immediately, Shifeng began classifying his mana based on the Ice World Saint's introduction on the various elements. Fire-type mana was violent, scorching hot, and extremely difficult to control. Ice-type mana was quiet, cold, and hardly moved. Wind-type mana was free, refreshing, and spirited. Different elements of mana had their own habits and operating principles. If it were in the past, Shifeng would have found it impossible to distinguish them in detail. However, Shifeng was currently a half-step Grandmaster Magician. While distinguishing between the various types of mana remained difficult, it wasn't impossible. One trick he thought of to facilitate this process was constructing a single attributed elemental magic array for each of the various elements. This magic array would act as a filter and capture only the specific element of mana it was made to capture. The other elements would pass through the magic array unimpeded. This way, whenever he wished to call upon a particular element, he could immediately use the corresponding elemental magic array to gather the mana he needed. Originally, constructing these elemental magic arrays within one's mana body was a very delicate task. Even a half-step grandmaster magician like Shifeng would need 1 or 2 days to construct all of the necessary elemental magic arrays. However, thanks to the eternal energy surrounding him, Shifeng spent only 15 minutes constructing all the necessary magic arrays. Immediately, the various elements of mana in Shifeng's mana body gathered at specific locations, no longer one big heterogeneous mess. Amazing! So, this is the effect of segregating mana? When Shifeng scanned the mana in his body, he found that not only had its purity undergone a qualitative transformation, but his mana body also resonated far more powerfully with the environment. In fact, he also had a much easier time manipulating the magic array responsible for controlling his mana body. Now, he could even operate his mana body with a threefold manipulation method. So, this is why I couldn't cross the 110% threshold despite my concentration having reached the Tier 4 peak standard. Looking at the system notification that had appeared before him, Shifeng grew ecstatic. Just a moment ago, his mana body's completion rate had hit the legendary threshold. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. His mana body had reached a 120% completion rate. Meanwhile, the instant his mana body reached the 120% threshold, Shifeng sensed his physique improving significantly, and his perception of his surroundings rising to a whole other level. Most importantly, his mana was not only much denser than before, but its quantity had also doubled. Now that I'm done segregating my mana, it's about time I started taking on the trial. Shifeng shifted his gaze toward the half-meter-long bridge underfoot. Chapter 2852 Breakthrough. Tier 5 Concentration. Even without Shifeng deliberately maintaining the bridge, the aura he radiated was now enough to slow the bridge's collapse drastically. A 120% completion rate mana body truly is amazing. No wonder people thought players could contend against a dragon of the same tier. Once a player's mana body reached 120% completion, Shifeng was astonished as he studied the stabilized bridge underfoot. Despite not making a conscious effort to control his mana body, he exerted a powerful stabilizing effect on his surroundings. With how powerful his current mana body was, he couldn't even begin to imagine how powerful his mana domain had become. Fighting a dragon of the same tier and level aside, he could now contend against a half-step demon king of the same level at the very least. Afterward, Shifeng began injecting his segregated mana into the broken bridge. Once he did so, the broken bridge seemed renewed. The bridge's gradual collapse instantly halted, and its toughness had clearly risen to a whole new level as well. At this time, the bridge could probably receive Tier 4 attacks without sustaining any damage. Amazing! Sure enough, this is the true way to use mana. In the past, whenever he activated a skill or spell, he would make use of every type of mana available in his body to manipulate the ambient mana around him. Achieving a 10% efficiency by doing so would already be fortunate. This was because most skills and spells utilized only a specific element of mana to activate. To manipulate only a specific type of mana in the environment, using the corresponding element of mana to do so would yield the best results. Using other elements would still allow one to exert a certain degree of control. However, the efficiency would be incredibly poor. A backlash might even occur. Now that Shifeng had perfectly matched his mana with the ambient mana, he could use the ambient mana's power at 100% efficiency. One could easily imagine how much of a boost to his combat power this change would bring. After thoroughly stabilizing the broken bridge, Shifeng shifted his attention to the mana constructs keeping the bridge together. Keeping the bridge's mana constructs stable and operational could be considered the bottom line for this trial. If he wished to pass the trial, he would need to reconstruct the bridge. Otherwise, all he could do was stand still and stare idly at the distant land until his time ran out. After carefully inspecting the bridge, Shifeng was surprised. Previously, he had focused entirely on stabilizing the bridge, so he hadn't spent much time observing the bridge itself. Now that his mana body had reached a 120% completion rate, his perception of his surroundings had improved to a point where it felt as if he had again taken over a half-step demon king's body. DI is expected of the Dragon Race's trial. This bridge's mana constructs are simply phenomenal. Shifeng sighed in awe as he observed the broken bridge's structure. This bridge has made use of practically every property and operating principle of the various elements of mana. Without a considerable understanding of these aspects, it would be impossible to create such mana constructs. In God's domain, it was already a heaven-defying task for players to gain a deep understanding of the operating principles of the various types of mana. Hence, making proper use of these types of mana was simply a luxury players couldn't afford. In fact, even the Ice World Saints Legacy provided a detailed introduction of only Ice-type mana, and just briefly touched on the other elements. Needless to say, the Legacy didn't include instructions on how to use these other mana types. However, the bridge Shifeng stood on perfectly displayed the basic use of the various elements of mana. It was much better than a simple text introduction. Of course, it wouldn't be an easy task to see how exactly this bridge was constructed. This was because ordinary Tier 4 existences couldn't get a clear view of the operating principles of mana, let alone the operating principles of a mana construct. Only dragons with their high life ratings could possibly accomplish such a feat at Tier 4. Even so, this situation was definitely a massive opportunity for Tier 4 players. The biggest hurdle Tier 4 players needed to cross to reach Tier 5 was the construction of their personalized mana body. This process required players to have not only excellent control over mana, but also a profound understanding of the operating principles and usage of mana and knowledge of the construction of mana bodies. Meanwhile, the broken bridge underneath Shifeng just so happened to address these problems. Suppressing the impatience in his heart, Shifeng immediately began reconstructing the broken bridge with his own mana. Following this, time passed quickly. Although reconstructing the bridge was incredibly challenging, due to the eternal energy surrounding him, Shifeng found that the incomparably complex mana constructs weren't impossible to understand. Despite encountering failure one after another, Shifeng did not grow disappointed, but even became increasingly excited instead. This was because he was making progress with each failure. As he continuously adjusted his utilization of the various mana types, his control over them also improved in precision and efficiency. After experimenting for 2 days straight, Shifeng finally constructed a half-meter-long bridge. I did it! I finally did it! An indescribable sense of joy and excitement welled up in Shifeng's heart as he looked at the portion of the bridge he had reconstructed. Although the bridge he reconstructed looked much cruder than the original bridge, it did not send him plunging into the abyss below when he tried to stand on it. Most importantly, he had finally gained a basic understanding of the various mana constructs. This meant that he had finally reached a qualified level when it came to utilizing the various elements of mana. With these achievements, he was confident he could begin constructing his Tier 5 mana body. Of course, Shifeng did not let his achievements blind him. He still gave the trial's completion top priority. After all, having a divine dragon as a companion was much more important than constructing his personalized mana body. Immediately afterward, he resumed reconstructing the broken bridge and advanced toward the distant land. Although Shifeng had spent 2 days reconstructing his first half-meter-long segment, now that he had a foundation, he could reconstruct the subsequent segments much more quickly. Moreover, he also improved his precision with every segment he reconstructed, which in turn made his reconstructions look increasingly refined. After working for nearly a day, Shifeng finally reached the 500-meter mark, his achievement extending his time limit by 1 day. The distance from the starting point to the distant land is roughly 20 kilometers. So, I'll need to extend the bridge by 7 kilometers or so to pass the trial. If I can complete 500 meters per day, I should finish this trial within half a month. After Shifeng made some rough mental calculations, anticipation filled him. Although he would be spending much more time in this trial than he initially expected, the harvest he would gain was very much worth the time spent. After resting for a moment, Shifeng promptly resumed his job as a construction worker. Meanwhile, after another 8 days had gone by while Shifeng was reconstructing the broken bridge, a loud tearing sound suddenly appeared in a secret land in the eastern continent. A spatial channel several kilometers tall and 20 kilometers wide was sealed in this secret land. The moment the loud tearing noise sounded, the divine rune sealing the spatial channel shattered and faded out of existence. It is still starting in the end? An illusory figure appeared before the spatial channel. After looking at the spatial channel with a complicated gaze, this figure then disappeared without a trace. At the same time as this illusory figure disappeared, nearly 20 figures emerged from this gigantic spatial channel. Every one of these figures exuded powerful and ancient auras highly incompatible with the surrounding space. Ha ha ha! It's finally open. Our guild was even the first to discover it. So this is an alternate god's domain? Why is the ambient mana here so thin? Although the mana density is somewhat low here, it is still another god's domain. Hurry up and notify the guild leader and the others. Tell them that the seal has been lifted and that the world passage is open. Have them make the necessary preparations. I'll go ahead with a team to understand the situation of this god's domain. We must claim this world for ourselves ahead of the other guilds, said the middle-aged man standing at the head of the team. At the middle-aged man's words, the team immediately split into 2 groups. 3 players returned to the world passage, while the remaining 15 players charged straight toward the secret land's exit. As these foreign invaders were taking action, Shifeng was struggling inside the distant special space. I didn't think that reconstructing the bridge would place such a huge burden on the brain. It's already been 8 days. Yet I haven't even reached the 3,400-meter mark. I've also exhausted more than half of my concentration already. Shifeng smiled bitterly as he looked at the distant land. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. At this time he more or less understood why the giant dragon had such low hopes for him. Originally, he thought that he could progress 500 meters a day. However, the more time he spent in the trial, the greater the mental pressure he suffered from reconstructing the bridge. Whenever he tried manipulating the bridge's mana constructs, he felt like needles were pricking his mind. Moreover, the degree of pain intensified as he progressed, making the bridge's reconstruction increasingly difficult. Now, he couldn't even manage 300 meters in a day. Despite this situation, Shifeng had no intention of giving up. After all, every moment he spent in this special space allowed him to improve his control over the various elements of mana. If possible, he even wished he could spend several months in this special space. However, this obviously wasn't allowed, as proven by the increasingly powerful mental pressure he suffered. This feature was most likely implemented to deal with anyone trying to exploit this special space's benefits. Shifeng continued pushing forward for the next 3 days. By the end of the 3rd day, Shifeng would suffer intense pain even if he only slightly manipulated his mana. After the 4th day, Shifeng's complexion had not only become deathly pale, but even his consciousness was beginning to blur. Meanwhile, as his consciousness grew increasingly hazy, he gradually understood that his time in the trial was coming to an end. This wasn't just because he was running out of time but also because he would thoroughly exhaust his concentration and collapse after a few more attempts. The next moment after Shifeng completed another 1-meter-long segment and was about to lose consciousness, the system's crisp and indifferent voice suddenly entered his ears. System. Congratulations. Your concentration has reached the Tier 5 standard. It is also detected that your mana body has reached the 120% completion rate. You have one opportunity to receive a world blessing and reconstruct your sea of consciousness. Do you wish to activate the world blessing now? Opportunity will be rejected by default if you do not respond in 3 minutes. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.